Here we go.
This is a meeting of the Formworks. This is a meeting of the zoning task force on September 17th, 2024. It is a hybrid meeting. There are people that could sign up online, but we do not
We
have
have
this.
one participant.
We have one participant online. The meeting is being recorded and will broadcast over the town's website at www.eastham-ma.gov.
Terrific.
And we have a form.
And we have a quorum. Welcome, everyone. We're back for our fall and hopefully our home stretch set of work on our zoning. I would like to welcome a new member, Martin Ridge, who has joined us officially this summer. Martin is our representative from the zoning board, the ZBA. And he came on midsummer and we gave him a lot of things to read, and we're going to give him a quiz. That's going to be the first part of the agenda now.
Anyway, I wasn't expecting 4 weeks of fantastic weather.
Yes, you were challenged. So, welcome, Martin.
Thank you.
I around membership. Well, while I'm mentioning this, I'll just mention
Thank you so much.
We've had some interest. The search committee has had some interest in joining the zoning task force. I spoke to representatives of the search committee as well as
Jackie?
not Jackie,
Jamie?
Jamie Dimitri. And I explained to them where we are in this work, that we are 3 meetings away from a report. And what I said is, someone coming on, in particular, a couple of the folks that were applying have had no zoning background. I said, this would be sort of, to come in at these 3 meetings would be very, very difficult. Aside from the fact that there's kind of no time on my part and I'll speak for Paul on his, to really get some deep orientation. So what I've said to both of them is that once we get to this report, I think it's really very important for some new membership to be recruited. What I would like to do with the committee is that as we have progressed over these last almost now 3.5 years, there are certain skill sets that were very helpful to have at the table. And some of the people we'll talk about that we interviewed this summer, there was an architect who was just fabulous and a developer who was great. And, you know, so I'd really like to have a group discussion before we get to people about, you know, the task force going forward, the membership, how many people we want to recruit, and if there's some priority around some skill sets we potentially want to go out to. So I'm hoping that once we sort of get a report sort of out there while we're doing the community process, we could also maybe have a, you know, either an in-person or a Zoom meeting, really to just brainstorm going forward membership. So, and after that, then I'd engage the search committee. So I wanted to let everybody know about those conversations, because I personally just didn't have the bandwidth and didn't think it would be the best use of our time right now. So that's in the welcome. Just a couple other points before we dive in. I want to just reiterate a little bit of the timeline, and some of this is really going to be open for discussion. We established last spring that we wanted to meet 3 3-hour meetings and hopefully get to the point where we had a draft zoning bylaw as well as a draft set of design regulations ready to circulate for comment. So that brings us to about the middle of November. Following that, we're going to need to do report writing, and we can talk about that in one of our meetings. We can put that on the agenda about, in the past, Paul and I have done a draft, and then we've done a lot of circulating online, getting edits and feedback. We can talk about whether that works or whether we want to meet as a body as a whole in December to look at a report. As far as sort of, you know, once we get a report put together and have the zoning bylaws in draft, kicking around with Paul, we were thinking in the January period, we might have a longer workshop in which we invite the select board, the planning board, zoning board, health board, conservation board, and any other relevant boards that we think would be appropriate, whether it's open space or any of the other environmental boards, et cetera. We'd like to have a workshop where we 2-3 hour workshop where we go deep and really kind of orient folks. Also in January, that would be a workshop with sort of people who are actively engaged. Then we'd also want to have probably a similar, maybe somewhat less technical, I don't know, we could play it by ear, a community forum where we do a similar things, potentially at the library or someplace where we really get people more broadly involved. That would be a January to sort of get feedback there. We have some required presentations under the DCPC legislation. We have to present for comment, not for approval, to the health board and the conservation board. So those we'd want to do in February. And we have to be in front of the planning board who has to do a vote. And that also would be in February. And then once we get to that point, the Cape Cod Commission, after all of our local boards have looked at it, they will do their review. And because it's a DCPC, they will also have to endorse and approve. And so that would hopefully be early March. And later in March, after all of this process, hopefully we're back with a draft that goes to the select board and they would approve it. And their approval at that point is an endorsement that it should be on the warrant. And that has to happen before April 1 when they go to print. And then basically it's town meeting, except a week before town meeting, there's a pre-meeting that Jackie holds, but that's really a big overview meeting. So that's probably not going to be the moment when we do in-depth presentations. So there's a lot of points. And I think
Planning board hearings in March too.
planning board, the official planning board hearing, yes, we'll invite the planning board to workshop in January. I think based on our past experience, I was thinking about this because there's some loose ends that we'll talk about tonight that we have to tie down. And then there's just a lot here. And I'm thinking that, in our past experience, we've gone out with proposals and, after having multiple presentations, issues have arrived and, again, we're just an advisory group. We're making recommendations. There's a lot of people who will sort of weigh in with formal votes, but we've made some minor and actually some substantial changes to our documents. I can recall 2 years ago when we were doing development limits. Honestly, when we were going out, I thought we'd get a lot of blowback, and the one pushback we got was our development limits were too big, and they asked us to scale them down. Last year, we had identified 17 properties that had more than 2 rental certificates. In the course of this, we didn't realize that 3 of those certificate holders were cottage colonies that were singular ownership, and our bylaw would be very, very difficult to comply with. So those got pulled up. Those 3 are being treated as an exception, and the rest of the bylaw went forward. This is a long-winded way of saying that, I anticipate we can go out with something, and over the 3 or 4 month period, we're going to figure out, did we miss something? Is there unintended consequences, or is there not support for this? So whatever we do here in the next 3 meetings will definitely not be the final word on what we do.
And on that point, I would think that given this topic, as opposed to some of the others, that this might engender more attention and more businesses wanting to comment, whether they be current businesses, people are thinking of expanding to Eastham, developers. I would expect it would catch more attention than perhaps some of the other things that, like you say, were sort of one-off people, as opposed to this is something people have been waiting in Eastham for a while. So I would think it would get a lot more attention. I don't know.
Who knows?
I mean, the biggest discussion at the last town meeting was trees.
I know.
So-
Clear cutting and trees.
Well,
Yeah.
they have trees.
Yeah, we do. We love trees.
We never know. And then the other thing I just want to say by introduction, and then we can go over some of the feedback we received this summer, is we got to the point where Ted had made all of the adjustments, and so we sent out the zoning bylaw for review and discussion tonight. Ted is finalizing the design regulations, and hopefully within the next week, Paul, we want to change up some pictures and stuff. There's some tweaking. Hopefully within the next week and a half or so, well before the next meeting, we'll get the design regulations out so that we look at them sort of as a standalone. One of the things, and I think I said this in my email, we spent all of last year keeping the design regulations and the zoning bylaw together as one document. It would be a massive, massive document. Also, there's some functional things in the design regulations. You know, they're very interrelated. So procedurally, we're trying to put them before the planning board and have them both approved. Obviously, the regulations would be conditionally approved upon approval by town meeting. But the reason for that is, as you read through the bylaw, the sections in the bylaw are referencing design regulations you see in the design regulations, it's referencing back to zoning. They're an interconnected document. So that was one of the things we wanted to try to do there.
The regulations. The other reason for doing that is just because then the regulations don't need to go back to town meeting approval every time we want to adjust something.
Yeah.
In the regulations, that's a lot of the stuff that you're gonna see, you know, you need to do X amount of outdoor amenity space. And here in the regulations is the menu of here are the things that count as outdoor. And if, you know, everything under the sun isn't gonna be listed on there, but there might be something next year where, you know, whatever, something we didn't think of, we want that in the regulation. So, or, you know, in or out, different things. And so that's just functionally going to be a lot easier because that's where all the little details, if we want to put in more architectural details, more specificity or lighting, we don't have to go back to town meeting every single time.
I think that's a really strong approach. In my experience in doing bylaws, we tried to keep the operational procedures, the definite, you know, that kind of thing out of the bylaw, because bylaw should last for, we shouldn't have to touch the bylaw again, except for whoopses that maybe we have had happen, hopefully for a number of years, whereas I think the evolution of design standards could change. Sometimes fairly rapidly as new technology, new thought processes happen, so.
There could be a variety of things. Once the town, you know, the town owns 2 of the parcels, they could go out for RFPs.
Right.
There could just be, you know,
Things that come up.
you know, that make certain projects viable. If it's in a regulation, all it would require is a public hearing by the planning board and then adoption by the planning board. So a regulation can be much more easily changed than waiting for a town meeting.
And the Cape Cod Commission might come up with some interesting new approaches and ideas for the design guidelines that we would want to adopt. It makes it easier for that. Would they have to, since they're approving the bylaw, they don't have to approve the design guidelines? Or would that be-
Technically, no, but in reality,
So
we're
if
gonna
we
have
do
it as
tweaks,
a package, because,
I mean, later, like year 2, if we. decide to do
the
some-
regulations, oh, no.
Yeah.
Initially.
Okay.
So anyways, so that's sort of teeing up what we're, you know, sort of the next 3 meetings, sort of the process we're thinking. I mean, this is the community process, the outreach that I outlined is sort of a result of Paul and I brainstorming. So I want to open this up. I don't know if people have reactions to this. It's too much, too little.
I think it's about right. I mean, we can't do it before we have the report to
Mhm.
the documents ready. So there's that. The only other thing we could do is if we had small group stakeholder meetings, which to allow, particularly I'm thinking businesses and developers who have a vested interest in the economic development that's going to happen. If we had small group meetings where they felt comfortable talking, because they're gonna come at it in a very professional, detailed way that perhaps in the community at large may not be the same. And so if we have a community meeting and you've got some people wanting to get down to the nitty-gritty detailed 10 feet, 15 feet, 20 feet, specification kinds of thing, and you have other people who are making more general, more broad comments, you might want to think about a strategy that would have
Mhm.
sort of two levels of discussion.
Yep.
But the timing of it, I think, is, and people will have, the community will have plenty of opportunity to comment at the select board meeting, the planning board. the zoning-
Well, yeah, all of the meetings are
all the
public meetings, so,
public and will be publicized and.
yeah, so,
Hopefully an article in the Independent that
Yeah.
talks about what we're doing, so people will read that and be encouraged to participate.
I think the initial thought, Mayor and I were like, when we have these, the community forum, to do it in a way that we're not really walking through this document.
No, you
And
can't
it's
do that.
more like, yeah, we'll pull out some key charts and numbers and things that we gotta address, but it's more like driven with the maps, the visuals, and kind of like relating it back to the strategic plan and the big picture and how this all fits in with the village center. So that
Yes,
people just take away the big picture.
right.
I think as far as some small stakeholder meetings, that's a good idea. Realistically, getting those together
I know.
is not realistic, but I think what we could do is probably, I could certainly have some like open office hours where I'm here, not at my
Yeah.
office, but here. And advertise that, so just like I'm here to answer questions and it's kind of, so we could advertise that in,
Sure.
in the fall, winter.
I think that's a great idea, Paul, just to give people who have real detailed comments.
Mhm.
Because you want sort of those two different levels. We're really selling the vision of what these different sub-districts are going to look like and feel like 20, 30, 40 years from now.
Mhm.
That's what we want to articulate at the community meeting. The details, the devil's always there, so. Yeah,
Okay.
that's a great idea, Paul.
Good. Oh, and I was remiss. Are we good? Martin or Kevin, do you have any? Remiss, Pat Canavan is working tonight. She will make the next two meetings and she sent in comments. She read everything. So when we get to review, I can bring that up. So I just want you to know, Pat's still kicking around. If people feel fine with that, I thought we could quickly go over, there was a lot of meetings that happened this summer, and I thought we could maybe go over and, between Paul and I, give sort of the high level feedback of what we heard. So I'll start out, I'll give my version, you can, Sarah from the Cape Cod Commission, we thought she might be here tonight, but she's attended probably 2/3 of our meeting. Towards the end of last year, I was really pushing her because I don't want to do all this work and get to the commission and have it blow up because we weren't attuned to things. And what really I started to understand a little bit more, and she did articulate this at meetings, is from the Cape Cod Commission's point of view, when they worked and did technical assistance with the town going back in 2016, a lot of their focus and a lot of their analysis was on transportation and traffic impact. So they have a really high sensitivity to anything that's generating more traffic and more curb cuts and more of that kind of activity. That is, I think the other stuff, we're working around best practices that Ted and the commission has brought to our attention. That really is the sensitive spot for them. So they gave us some feedback, and one of the things in the definitions of the sub-districts going from core commercial to transitional to limited to office residential. There was an intentionality from their point of view when they approved this, that density and most activity would start with core a little less, but also in transitional. And then when you got to limited commercial and office residential, I'll say, I walked away from the meeting saying, oh, when they said limited commercial, they really meant limited. That was sort of their thinking. So that was my big takeaway. And there were some uses, they came out of that process last year saying some of the uses, they felt that we ended up with a process in which what was allowed in transitional and allowed in limited was pretty much the same, that we were not differentiating between those two. And when we went back, we were kind of being, oh yeah, well, maybe some of that would go in limited. So, I won't say we had sophisticated analysis, but we were just thinking that something seemed more reasonable. And then we bumped into this sort of strategy. Paul, did I summarize that, or do you have anything
Yeah,
to add?
no, it's definitely one of the things that was a key part of establishing the district was sensitivity to traffic generating. And one of the key components is to limit that and direct it to the core commercial transition. I think, so yeah, we did go through over the summer, we did go through the use table. I know we worked a lot on the use table last year. There weren't a whole lot of changes. It was really just minor things that I think were kind of obvious in that light, convenience, there was uses in there that were allowed in limited commercial, that convenience store. I think there was supermarket, there was, I think even a gas station was in there. So things that are obviously traffic generator. So
More intense commercial.
more intense commercial. So those were taken out of those districts. I think, what was the other one? The childcare facility, drugstore. I don't know if that one was in there or not, but so that was essentially what it was the traffic generators. We moved those out of limited and office residential where they were allowed.
So we can go down that. Legal counsel, we raised the question to Carolyn. Now, Carolyn Murray will have to do, once we get this in draft form, we'll shoot this off to her because like the commission, I want to get some early warning. If there's any red flags here, as soon as possible, we'll get her feedback. But the question we posed to her was, okay, the town has adopted town-wide zoning over the last 4 years. There's certain things like inclusionary zoning, motel conversions, short-term rentals, et cetera, et cetera. All of these things were on the books as town-wide, but there's some provisions in the DCPC, which basically says, if your town zoning conflicts, the DCPC will prevail. But we needed to go through and figure out how do we integrate these. Carolyn has given us, I asked the question, can we just have a universal? Can we just say, oh, they all apply, and put it in there and not have to go through it? And she said, no, you can't do that. And she has given Paul a very detailed memo about little suggestions, little nuances, tweak a language, tweak a language, tweak a language. We've not done that. I think I might say to Paul, he probably needs to sort of come back to us by next meeting, because we're going to run out of time, and look at Carolyn's advice and say, okay, in order to address these legal concerns, we would have to make the following language changes.
I'm sorry, I didn't follow exactly what you're saying. Is she saying that all the parts of the bylaw that apply town-wide have to also be incorporated into the DCPC stuff?
We just have to make sure that there's no conflicts. So this is an academic one. The inclusionary zoning, we have a provision that says if a developer doesn't want to build the affordable unit on the site, they can take the cost of that unit and either build a unit with town approval somewhere else, or they give give the town the equivalent of those dollars
Correct.
for the town to build it somewhere else. That's in our bylaw. In the DCPC, there's language about impact fees. And so, again, this is kind of arcane legalese, like how does a developer's monetary requirements under inclusionary zoning intersect with impact fees, and are those
The same thing.
same thing? And is it just nomenclature that we have to change language, or do we have to do something? So that's why I said, it's kind of persnickety little things like that throughout, and I would again ask Paul to come back next time and give us some identification. So that was legal counsel. Do you want to take a crack at wastewater? Would you have the wastewater update?
The wastewater planning is still, in flux, and we don't know, and ultimately it has to go to town meeting for approval for the funding to go to construction and implementation. So at this point, really trying to take the best available information from the wastewater planning and see where it intersects, aligns with the zoning, and really it gets down to like density. So in the zoning, we're proposing certain densities, maximum densities and units and so forth. So we just want to be in the same ballpark that if we're going to say, your maximum unit density per building is X, that's aligned with what they're projecting for available wastewater capacity. And I can't go beyond that with specifics because I don't have them. So I've been talking with the wastewater consultants and staff that's doing that, and just trying my best to make sure that they understand what we're doing and the numbers we're putting into the bylaw. I think we're in a lot. I don't anticipate any huge issues. We're never going to have a pinpointed number that's exactly a match. Just think we're talking about densities that would be able to be accommodated with the size of wastewater treatment that we're talking.
Are they on track for wastewater for the spring town meeting?
As far as I know, that still would be on meeting.
They submitted the designs. I just copied that.
And so they're mapping out the different zones that would be sewered. And one of those areas is the Route 6 corridor, which overlaps with our zoning area. So they have existing, this all comes down to what's the expansion capacity going to be. So we have to take care of what's there, what's out there now, and then is there any expansion capacity? So they're using the best available info, which is basically water usage data, but not all the properties are connected to water, and then just basing it on the standard metric for what is there. There's a restaurant there, you go to the wastewater regulations, if there's a design flow. So what we've been trying to do is anticipate based on feedback as we've been meeting over the last few months with these business owners, like what's your game plan? Are you looking to expand? Are you looking to add on to your building? Are you looking to put an apartment above? So trying to give that feedback to the wastewater folks so that they have some gauge on people are really raring, like if the capacity is there, they want to add 20 more seats or they want to do this and that. So again, it's really, at this point, it's just making sure that the communication's being exchanged.
How will that capacity get divvied up? Is it first come, first served?
I don't know how that would work.
Yeah, I mean, I took some, I looked at the impact statement that they submitted to the state, and I just copied a couple pages out of it. They've got future growth projection factor of 1.26. So is 0.26 the growth factor? We're trying to track that down. The other thing that's, I think, required, because wastewater is happening for environmental reasons, not necessarily economic development reasons. But there is a requirement that there be, separate from us, a growth neutral bylaw. And we still don't know exactly, or do you have more information about what a growth neutral bylaw is?
Who's the requirement from? Is that a state requirement?
It's part of the
DEP.
DEP, yeah.
Yeah.
Which could mean that, I mean, to Martin's point, I don't know how this is gonna be divvied up. It could also mean that, for example, in tea time, there has been conversations that even with all the wastewater, because of densities and all the activity, the project at tea time may in fact have to do their own treatment plant. I mean, it just may be beyond the scope of all of the wastewater, but we don't know that at this point.
Mary said the impetus for wastewater was driven by the environmental, so. This goes to the federal government has mandated that we have to meet the, clean water. That's what every town is struggling with, so it's really driven by, we have to meet the water quality standards in our watersheds. So salt pond, town code, watersheds, and the areas that contribute to that, so mostly those are the residential areas in and around those watershed areas. That's the impetus, that's the reason that we have to do this. And it's to clean up the water. So it's worked out that the area that would be where the treatment plant would be located is going to be in vicinity of Route 6. So it works out that we could also piggyback on this to achieve some economic development growth, get the commercial districts on sewer, but it's not like you normally think like, well, we got a downtown and we got a sewer and it's all business development. It's not driven by that. So because it's on the environmental piece, you have to have a growth neutral bylaw that basically explains, well, we're doing this to clean up the water. And if you're going to then start adding the capacity and adding intensity of uses, we can't, it's got to balance out, because so we have to explain how we're going to not further degrade the water quality as we're adding uses and capacity into the wastewater flow. So there has to be some offset. And that could be in a combination of ways. It could be placing certain limits on capacity of growth, offsetting with open space, dedicated open space, non-development. I don't know exactly what goes into the bylaw with the all the moving parts are, but that's essentially why we need to do it, because you're cleaning up the water. You kind of explain that you're not going to mess it up again with excessive use elsewhere in town, and it has to be offset within the same watershed too. So can't just be, we're cleaning up the water in this area and then we're going to dedicate a bunch of open space way in the north of town that has nothing to do. It has to be an offset. So that's the other part of calibrating this to each watershed and where the sewer areas are going to be.
Do you think it's tied to impervious surfaces? So if you do the development and you're going to footprint and it's so many, square feet of impervious surface, do you have to compensate for that by allocating other open spaces to be neutral, or?
Could be, but it has to be in the same watershed too, so.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Is the neutral growth rule, is that right from the state or federal?
We think so.
That's a requirement to get approval for the our wastewater plant. The state has to see that deed.
That's really important. I mean, because we have, standards for impervious surfaces and for open space. But if it turns out what they're really looking for is if you do a development and it's got a footprint this big, you have to equal that with the amount of open space, impervious surface. I don't know. But it'd be nice, we should know that, because you may have to increase the amount of open space if that's what the goal is.
Trying to get more detail on that.
Yeah.
I mean,
Because it also doesn't make sense if there's a housing crisis. And one of the biggest emphasis is to try to create a couple hundred more housing units and say that we have neutral growth.
well, it puts the burden then on the housing developers to do their own treatments. I mean.
Well,
Yeah, so that was.
you're right. I just want to say there's two different things going and they're not aligned.
They're not.
What I meant is the federal government, DEP, says you have to clean up this water quality. They're not looking at it and They just, where's your wastewater plan? How are you gonna do it? You gotta have the growth neutral, you gotta offset. That's their view. That's not. They're not looking at anything else other than that. So we have to then figure out how to do both things. We're stuck with that problem, whereas they're just looking at it from what's the wastewater
It's almost like you say,
environmental.
we're gonna build a waste treatment plant here, to satisfy the government. And then we're gonna build another one exactly right next to it. Being managed by the same people and share some resources, and that's one's gonna be run by the town, that's gonna allow us to do this additional development.
Right, so it's at the state level, it's not, they're not connected. It's the same thing even on all the talk about the Title V septic regulations and the upgrades and the requirements that are gonna come from that, where a lot of folks are gonna have to upgrade to an IA system and what the impacts of that is going on in a separate sphere apart from the fact that now we have, no one can, we have the housing issue, people can't afford to live here, now we have to upgrade. They're in two silos.
Right.
The folks that are in the cubicle at DEP saying we have to do this are not talking to the folks in the cubicle at DHCD about the housing. And that's been talked about at public meetings with the state folks. And so, and then you get down to the local level, the local boards of health, their hands are tied. DEP, these are the regulations, they're in the uncomfortable position of like telling a lot of people, you're gonna have to put money in, upgrade these systems, and there's a comprehensive view that's not being taken in all of at all the levels that it needs to for these things to fuse together.
At the levels above the town. Is really what it kind of amounts to. That's
Yeah.
big. Yeah,
But DEP has to basically enforce the Clean Water Act.
right.
And that's, and the Clean Water Act, I sat for 10 years as a Boston Water and Sewer Commissioner, and they don't want to hear people can't afford this. I mean,
I just want to clean.
money is not a concern. It's just, are you in violation of the Clean Water Act,
But what I also think that conflict, so to speak, suggests is that as it relates to the work that we're doing, we should not be constrained by the wastewater plan entirely. We should have a vision that says, there's the wastewater plan and that'll take care of X amount of capacity. But we will need to find other ways to be neutral. New AI systems, Tea Time has its own system, whatever that is. And we should allow for that growth, provided that it meets whatever the right wording of requirement is in terms of being net neutral. So not limit the capacity for growth in the DCPC, but the growth above what the wastewater would allow has to be handled in another way. And whatever plans are put forward to the planning and zoning boards and the health department and the, COMCOM and all that has to lay out whatever that plan is.
Yeah, and I think exactly, I think, for example, we're suggesting densities around certain housing and things like that. It could be that the zoning changes and that's the density that's allowed, but it may not be the density that will be achievable,
Currently buildable.
unless there's some other thing,
Yes.
so.
But I would hope that we would not limit, set an artificial limit for growth beyond what we think is reasonable in terms of
Yeah.
the town and the character and all of that. Because there will come other solutions.
Yeah.
As it relates to the wastewater and sewer stuff.
I think the densities that we put in here are really based on the realities of the spaces that we were talking about and the building sizes. So I mean,
Right.
we're setting max building footprints, and so then we know we want to calibrate to certain unit sizes to incentivize the type of housing. So that the numbers kind of landed where they were just by, rationalizing that. It wasn't really
It's not
tied to the
constrained.
wastewater.
Right.
It was just, for me, it's just be nice to know that it's more like I want the wastewater folks to know these are the numbers, so just in case there is any fatal flaw or something that we would never be able to size it, like, you know, if we're just so far outside the bounds, I wanted to know that, and I don't, doesn't appear to be the case, so I'm not really worried about that.
Okay, but that's a good point.
We wanted just to bring it up. It's intersecting and the preliminary plan was submitted last December. And I know Jackie's goal is to have the construction dollars on the town meeting for May along with ours. So I'm hoping that between now and obviously before it goes to the warrant in April, there'll be some more, DEP will react to the plan, you know, we'll have some information there. Some of these other questions, clarity about what does a growth neutral bylaw mean, because I still don't know that completely. Pretty much, any other questions on wastewater? We'll go for the last.
Is, if the wastewater gets approved or disapproved at town meeting, let's say it gets disapproved. Okay, how does that impact what we're doing here?
Everybody would have to create their own alternative systems. I mean, every development would be kind of site specific doing that. Which is a cost. There were a lot of conversations with developers, affordable housing developers, and general developers in the town, local businesses in the town, businesses that were in town plaza. And I was in some of those, and Paul and Ted were just in most of them. I mean, my takeaway was folks wanted to get clarity on zoning. They wanted to know what they can and cannot do going forward. From the people who are running businesses, the availability of a workforce is like a key thing for them. And you know, we sort of floated concepts like top of the shop housing, backlot housing, the notion that you could create housing where people would have both a live and work situation. That was very positively received. I mean, people thought, like, because the workforce is a huge issue. In particular, as we were probing, how do you keep your restaurant open year round? So that, you know, again, this goal of having a year round community. The other thing that was enormously well received, and it's not necessarily, it came out of this project, but it's not on us, is, you know, coming out of the charrette last year, Jackie sort of asked our consultants, Peter Flicker, to really lay out some new roadway designs behind, you know, behind the town center plaza up to tea time, as well as the whole Holmes Road and maybe some connections there. That is both the commission as well as the local businesses and developers we've talked to. Those are very, very well received. Again, what we've done is to say, okay, if we look at the potential for those roads in the future, and the future could be, you know, and we've not done, how does this happen? Easements, eminent domain. I mean, we're not going near anything about how you actually achieve that. But we've tried to look at, does the underlying zoning then, if these roads go in, does the zoning give us opportunities around new opportunities for business owners as well as opportunities for new housing? So why don't you give a little more about what we heard from business and developers?
Yeah, so I mean, this is part of the zoning, and that this component of it is the regulating plan, and there's maps that'll be in here that describe that. These, you know, future roadways are what is going to allow us to get the housing in the areas where we think it's most suitable, and most notably the area behind Holmes Road. If we could do a connection from Holmes Road back out to Route 6, and then a connection that would run parallel to Route 6 between Brackett and Tea Time.
Put it on the screen.
Oh, yeah, perfect, thank you. So
Do you have it there?
this
Is it-
this
it's not
just,
laid out?
this doesn't really show it.
Okay.
It would, again, going back to the sensitivity about adding traffic on Route 6 and the commission's concern about that, that's a key piece. We're limiting curb cuts, getting traffic off of Route 6. But also, like I said, that opens up a lot of key areas where we think we can accommodate higher density residential that's set back from Route 6. And alleviate some of the traffic concerns.
Are
We,
people pretty familiar with these proposed roadways?
And,
Okay.
and what we handed out on page 6.
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh, okay, still look at it.
and,
Yeah.
and also potential connection from Holmes Road through the Main Street Mercantile development, which may not be a road, just given it's near wetlands or anything, but it could be an important bike or pedestrian pathway that maybe we could get designed through there. So there's kind of three main new connections, and then added to that is just ensuring, like, you know, Brackett Road continues to be a safe bike and pedestrian friendly, and then obviously the Route 6 upgrades, which are also part of this, is in time getting bike pedestrian access along Route 6 itself. So we've talked about, like Mary said, it did get a lot of positive feedback. We've talked directly with all the property owners that actually would be impacted directly on that, and I've gotten yeah, good feedback on it. Nobody, you know, and again, this is just in concept. We don't know how it would be takings, leases, purchasing. But in the concept of it, I think all the business and property owners understand this could be a benefit to their options for site development, business expansion.
Just, I was looking at map and I just had one question. The, proposed primary street to the west of 6 coming off of Brackett. Is that old,
Yeah.
what's the name of that road, Old Quarter Colony or whatever it is?
Yeah.
Yeah, and just goes down and hooks up to Massasoit?
Mhm.
Okay, that's what I thought it was, but the map's so small, I couldn't quite,
I know, it's kind of hard to see.
yeah, okay,
But the idea is basically is to try to create internal connectivity
right.
so that we can disperse the traffic, so we can take some off of Route 6. But at the same time, open up new opportunities for development deeper into the district. And it includes not just, you know, street enhancements, street improvements. So for example, Brackett Road would have a sidewalk, a continuous sidewalk and street trees. But even like simple things like making trail connections to the Cape Cod Trail or the rail trail. And how it gets executed is a combination of different things. I mean, if there's someone who comes in with a proposal and it's at the end of Holmes Road, for example, that would be something that the planning board of the town would try to negotiate with that developer to try to make the next connection in that overall network. So it's going to take quite a while to do that, but if you put it on a plan, and you start to see site plans, you know, with the opportunity to do that, that's where the town can really make a difference over time in terms of creating the network.
And it helps the planning board just
Yeah.
push for those things, because they can say, well, it's not just this piecemeal. Because someone could say, well, you're gonna make me build a sidewalk to nowhere. I'm the middle piece, and who knows, well,
Right.
yes,
There's an overall
but
plan,
it's
yeah.
part of a overall plan, and we're gonna have the next guy and the next guy and the next guy, so.
And we've also talked about the fact that all of these roadways, one of the things we might want to recommend, it's not a zoning thing, but sometimes we've recommended ancillary things, is like the town may want to appropriate some money to get some design done, get some of these roadways all sort of laid out at sort of a, not just a conceptual, but sort of, you know, more engineered and detailed business, so that whether it's negotiating with developers or more likely, you know, getting in line for the state for some of these, and I haven't digested the housing bill, but I'm being told that, you know, there's a lot of infrastructure money in that bill, and the notion that if there's a whole comprehensive plan around business and housing development, we're probably better positioned to get state and federal dollars to do roadway work.
Yeah, and get, you know, on the tip plan and try to
Yes.
get some transportation money.
Yeah. Exactly.
A good place to start would be Holmes Road.
Yeah.
You know, get that all
Yeah.
approved at the end, and then you got the next segment already, you know, ready to go.
Ready to go.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. So Anything else on the business and developer side? This may be the piece that's.
Most important.
Um,
Yes.
you know, the other thing that we made a couple of adjustments for, and this is where I said skill set. There was Ted Malone came in and he has an architect who's actively working on building and designing, affordable housing and commercial stuff in general.
Right.
She's local. She was unbelievable. If she said she lived in Eastham, I would have probably recruited her on the spot. But the cost of building, there's a building code that's being updated with a lot of emphasis on energy efficiencies and a lot of things like that, which has implications for height in the
Local square footage.
the square
yeah,
footage and the air exchange and the mechanicals
Yeah.
that need to go in there.
the
So
depth
we,
of the walls.
yeah, so we sort of looked, after her conversation, we said, are we providing enough space for, all of this kind of stuff? But, trying to look at the notes to that.
Would that be the kind of thing that you would ask her to specifically review what we're doing?
Well, she took a look, we had given her some preliminary stuff. Again, she and Ted Malone were really, this is, I would say the big piece that Ted was saying, and we also heard this from the community builders folks. If you want to do rental housing, you can do top of the shop, as we've talked about, going up an extra 5 feet and maybe getting 3 or 4 small 1-bedroom studios on top of a commercial building. But if you start going into rental properties, you really have to have 3 floors. I mean, you might be able to do market rate townhouses, et cetera, but if you want to get any amount of affordability, and you got to have 3 floors. So we can talk about that later when we propose this, but that was, and the project that's just broke ground in 65 units in Provincetown on a Shaker Road, Shank Painter Road.
Mhm.
Yeah, the Community Builders is doing that. It's 3 buildings, I believe, 65 units. It was town-owned land. And it's the scale of it. We're going to get some pictures for it. The scale of it is actually very, very reasonable.
Where was that project again?
Provincetown, they just broke ground, Shank Painter Road, yeah. So we heard that loud and clear.
And that's three buildings at 4 stories piece.
Three stories,
3 buildings, 3
3
stories.
pitched roofs.
Pitch roof,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think balconies, every unit has a balcony kind of thing. And the town-owned land is basically, I don't know exactly, but it's not even 2 acres. It's maybe like 1.5 acres. And there's a lot of open space and circulation. It looks, the model looks nice, but, and I think the other thing was 65 units, we keep hearing this, is kind of like the minimum. If you're gonna go into, you're doing a development where you want to have a range of low, mid, and high market rate housing. They said you got to be at 65. That's like, it can't be small. The numbers just don't. I mean, we heard that from 2 or 3 developers right now. And we had heard that last year from someone else, or from Bart Mitchell. We had heard that, but that's kind of like at a minimum density. And alternatively, because there's so much competition for these dollars, when we go out for properties that need deep subsidies, I mean, the town would be doing this. Also, the very large ones, the state is getting very comfortable with these smaller 65 to 80 units. Because I think they've got demand so much across the state that allocating money, it allows them to do more. And there's less public opposition to, 65 units as there is to 150 units in a bigger scale development. So anything else?
that we were talking about, the,
business and the developer feedback.
I think the, well, that gets into just changes we did to the building height standard.
Yep, yeah, we'll go through that in detail, yeah. Okay, before it gets cold, do we wanna all grab a slice of pizza and then we can drill down through a zoning bylaw?
And the look and feel of the vision of what we're trying to create. It is a traditional Cape village. Other zoning areas, limited commercial, et cetera, trade park, maybe that would be true, but my feeling is in the core commercial, I would prefer not to have that.
Well, I mean, we started, the current bylaw speaks to. It sort of says, design shall be traditional New England, village.
Right.
And then it says, and it doesn't specify what that means, and it says, look at the Cape Cod Commission's guidelines. I mean, there's no teeth to it, but it's sort of setting out a principle and then referring you to the Cape Cod
I always
guidelines.
scratch that line about referring to the Cape Cod Commission.
No, we did, because we're substituting it with our own regulations, because
Because you're handing authority off to a different commission at that point.
well, you're handing authority off to a different commission, but the way it's written right now, there's no hard and fast interpretation of that, but I think the emphasis, I mean, I think some of the traditional zoning and I agree with Carolyn, we started calibrating off that traditional design to think about height bonuses for housing and different things like that, which I think is kind of, Ted, you used a phrase in I can't remember which document, which was creating a live, work, play entity. So if the notion is to maximize as much housing here, that to me would be contrary to having like a signature architectural statement. If we're really trying to say, we're going to put we don't have a lot of density. We have single 1 acre zoning in most of the towns. So if we're going to allow density, and we want a combination of commercial and housing, how do we, I mean, so everything's been calibrated off that, I guess.
But it doesn't cancel out any of that. Right? If somebody, you're still setting up a series of rules that are going to encourage as much housing as possible. If somebody comes in, we're here in 2024, and we're looking at a design, ecosystem looking, backwards and saying, whatever picture we took of traditional Cape Cod village is what we want to keep going. This is going to live 20 years. Whatever, if someone comes along like 10 years from now, and none of us are here, I think there should be an avenue where someone could say, it might not be the first building, might not be how, I agree with you, probably wouldn't have housing incorporated, but if somebody wants to build something very interesting for the town, I don't know why we wouldn't at least have a pathway for them to do that. We wouldn't exclude housing.
My fear on something like that, though, is that it could be interesting. I'm sure I'll see another version of say some company and another model. They say it's really great, but it's great in some other neighborhood. When you bring it back here, I'm just being the precedent that you let one person in with new design and everyone says, hey, it's really cool. Well, when's the next person come up with a different design, but it's also unique, they have more awards for it and stuff like that. And at what point you say, well, that's enough of that, we can only have 2 or 3 cool buildings. You have to have it allowed for anyone, really. If you're gonna do it for one person, it has to be open to everyone unless you've got something really strict about the guidelines that would prevent that. And you lose control of the Cape field and all those other things that were originally designed in the bylaws. That's the risk.
Because once you have an exception for one.
Does this building have a Cape field too?
Sort of.
That new building in front that helped win the grant money from the state because they're preserving it. That's about the end of it.
Yeah, you see, that's a matter of case.
I have to look at it through the window every day, so.
I think that's exactly the point. It is a matter of taste. And at least, I think that putting some guardrails down that collectively the town by adopting them agrees on, then makes it,
But what I'm trying to get away from
Less.
this, let's say 30 years from now, this is all built out. And somebody stands there, looks around, and you say, where are you? And they're gonna say, oh, I don't know, I'm in Howard, I'm in Chatham, I could be anywhere. Because you sort of designed this idea that we have a set of guidelines that are gonna end up looking like what Town looked like, in 1972, or what Howard looks like, Howard looks like right now. I'm just saying that when we set these sets of guidelines that are set to look like what something looked like 50 years ago, we're almost tied to 30 years from now. We are going to be very bland and indistinguishable. And there'll be nothing that will distinguish you, in East End, other than you might be able to, point out, the application. That's what I'm getting at, is that we've created a formula for good reasons, to get stuff. But I don't see, if this is really successful and there's a lot of building going on and a lot of competition, what allows something unique to make this?
I mean, my thought is in the core commercial, which is very limited.
No, I know, and I wasn't disagreeing with that argument, yeah.
Perhaps in the other areas, maybe there's an avenue for that, but as we know, what Kevin's saying is, once you do one, then you can't tell the next person you can't do that. Pretty soon there's no consistency. There isn't anything that says this is a standard.
I'm not afraid of saying no. I think you can say no to people. You have to.
You could make it a special permit process.
Yeah, it would be, yeah. we'd have to do a special
And
permit
put together
process.
some
So
parameters.
right now, we're
so
saying it's not allowed, as opposed to saying, let it go to planning or zoning and say, if you have something that's unique and distinguished, one of a kind, not a formula business, then you can go and apply for a special permit and make your case as to why this building is unique and why it has roots in, the Nauset area, something will be done.
Well, wouldn't this allow for a special permit application?
Well, I mean, there's certain things we've baked in here, like, pitch roofs. I mean, and that's hard. And again, I think from and I understand, I mean, I'm very sensitive to the fact that you can't, and we have to get to formula businesses, but we can't dictate ownership. So I want to be sure that that innovative style is not the McDonald's arches or, a variety of things like that. And this whole DCPC started because Dollar General wanted to come in and there's a flat roof, that whole.
In the strip mall.
In the strip mall.
You don't want to have.
So,
All looking like with a flat
yeah.
roof with a parapet wall and stuff like that.
Yeah, so,
That's not, no one has ever said that McDonald's is a distinctive design.
Yeah.
Outstanding architectural significance.
Don't you love going to places to McDonald's or certain chains and you don't realize that it.
they're changed because, I mean,
Like, this isn't.
yeah, because they've made it, they've made it consistent. Yeah.
Good examples of that. Right.
One of the things that still we'll get into when we go for the design regs is the design waiver. I think
Okay.
that's probably where this discussion.
Okay. I was looking for what, I was more, this was a half question,
Mhm.
sort of what is the path?
No, I know. And there's a political debate I think in the town. I know a lot about, more traditional style. Part of it, Martin, is as we looked at it, the notion of buildings, it's not just the building, it's the position of the building up front, the parking in back, creating a sense of a walkable business district.
That
So,
would apply to all buildings.
yeah,
Oh, yeah, no, all that I'm on board with. But it's, I'm just saying I don't see an opening for something.
Why don't we remember that when we get
Yeah,
to the design
yeah.
guidelines, we have to do that.
I mean, you could put them in the design regulations, create a special permit process and even take a picture of this as an example for the building up at the National Seashore. which is Cape Coddy, but it's not exactly traditional Cape.
Yes. Well, like this building.
Or even talk to the commission, I'm sure they must have some kind of idea of, those types of contemporary takes on, traditional Cape Cod buildings.
Okay. So back to
Just started.
this starting in, do we want to just start in? The maps here have not been tweaked finally, have they? Let me see one of those.
Yeah, so the map in the handout with the red is just kind of generalizing what.
There's no changes to the bylaw until you get to the maps.
Yes.
Right. So, we need to go over that.
So when we left here last May, we had already talked about extending the core commercial all the way down to Brackett Road to the bike trail to capture those couple other properties down there, the electrical supply company and the,
Start that sentence over there.
when we left in May,
Yeah.
we had there's a couple changes we're recommending, but a couple things we had talked about. We had extended the core commercial down Brackett Road
Right.
to the bike trail to
Okay.
pick up the two properties that weren't in it, because again, thinking about roadway improvements and all of that over the next 30 years, Brackett Road has the potential to be really more of the main street in terms of
Right.
the neighborhood.
Okay.
So that was one change. The Holmes Road, no, we haven't changed that,
Why don't
I'm
we
sorry. Go ahead.
Leave the,
Go
let's
ahead.
go to that one last.
Go that one last. We also made recommendations to pull in the Nickerson garage and the Shell station into core commercial, because those sit right across from that. And again, to be more cohesive in that. We were asked to look at extending the limited commercial up to include the Viking Shores and Poits.
Yeah, and the
Chocolate Cafe.
Chocolate
Cafe.
Cafe, Hopper Realty, and the leather shop, basically the properties that front on Route 6,
Yeah.
which prior to the DCPC, those were in a limited commercial. They got zoned to residential, but in reality, they are all pre-existing non-conforming businesses in a residential zone, and you're thinking about the future reuse expansion potential for those businesses to be viable. So putting them back in to some commercial district, limited commercial.
We had to talk to the commission a little bit about this, because they sort of reacted, and we said, basically, we're not talking about major development, but allowing, for example, the guy at Viking Shores wants to redevelop his hotel for the same purpose. So that's, he can do that. But he can't now, under his residential zoning, even add like a breakfast cafe.
Right.
He's limited there. So by making it into limited commercial, he has a little more opportunity to do that. So I think the question was, how far along that corridor did we want to go? And, there's a lot of residential behind that. It's all residential across the street. So we really, in this recommendation, we just took that strip fronting Route 6 up to Poits and would make that adjustment.
And on the west side of 6, on the map, it shows like where the art gallery, Ragosa art gallery is, would that become limited commercial? I mean,
No.
office residential also?
No,
No,
Because on the map, it kind of looks like that.
we have to fine tune the maps a little
Okay,
bit.
all right.
Then I'll let you you can explain home roads. The other big thing we realized is that in the original DCPC, they stopped the transitional zoning at tea time, and tea time is in limited commercial.
Mhm.
We are envisioning densities that are far beyond limited commercial on the tea time site. And if we simply just made all limited commercial could have that density, we bump into a variety of things that you can't just do it for that site, you do it for all the other parts of the district that are in limited commercial. And it really bumps into one big impediment, which is on the south side of limited commercial where it meets the National Seashore. That's part of the wastewater plant's watershed. And that's gonna have to be very low density down at that end. So, you know, we started jury rigging like, oh my God, the limited commercial is not gonna work for tea time. We can't just beef up limited commercial because that bumps into the commission on traffic. It also bumps into the wastewater. So we went back and forth, and the solution was, under this map, is to expand transitional commercial just one lot up to incorporate tea time. And so all of the things that have been envisioned for tea time can be accommodated under transitional commercial without upsetting the apple cart with all the other limited commercial around town. Is that correct? Okay.
So that would be added to this map, right? It's not on the map.
It would be,
We've outlined it on this agenda.
Yeah,
Oh, this one. So,
Okay.
well, then.
So, and then the Holmes Road piece, why don't you talk about that?
well, Holmes Road hasn't been finalized what we should do there, but the issue is that at the end of Holmes Road, that on the map where it's right where it's labeled TP, that is one giant parcel that's owned by one person. And that's really all the expansion potential for the trade park is wrapped up in that one parcel.
Mhm.
We don't know what the future holds for it, but that's also the connection. The roadway would have to run through there.
Right.
So that one property, and then also to the south, those 2 or 3 larger properties in limited commercial, which is basically Ocean Park Motel, the 4 Points, and the Atlantic Oaks campground. Those 4 parcels are really the area that could accommodate the most density in the future. If it were to go residential or parts of it to go residential use, that's where we could have the larger developments that we need for the housing. So that's where you could put 2 or 3 larger buildings, 3 stories set back from Route 6 with the connecting road off of Route 6. And so with that in mind, the issue is Trade Park doesn't allow residential, but that's where we want to make accommodations for it. We also have to be mindful that a big need that we've heard a lot is just trade storage, space for tradesmen to have storage and office space and equipment. So that one parcel, what do we do with it? Do we rezone it? It doesn't really fit into either any subjects
You're talking
that
about
we
the
have.
undeveloped part of the trade park right now, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
The
So-
end of Holmes Road.
So we kicked around, do we create a new sub-district that's a blend of these things? Do we just say, cut it in half, cut the zoning and split that lot in half and say this part's limited commercial with residential, this part's trade park? We don't know, as soon as you do that, you don't know where the road's gonna go. You don't know how future development's gonna play out.
Is the current landowner advocating one way or the other?
No, we did meet with her. We did meet with her and explained all this. And so they're open to redeveloping and open to the possibility of the roadway. They didn't shy away from any of the, in
Yep.
concept, any of the possibilities, which is great. But it's just what do we do with this? So we want it zoned so that it can accommodate some trade park, but have a transition for residential. So I think where we landed was that, so it may be a map change issue, but it's also a use table issue, because if we could keep its own trade park, but allow certain residential uses in the trade park, possibly by special permit, so that if someone came along, so if in the future this does open up, someone says, I want to build out the road, and this would be a great transition zone from, I guess in my mind, I picture, Holmes Road is what it is now. As you come down, if the new part builds out, it's not so much the kind of resident, it's a lighter residential and it's nice, over time you develop nicer buildings, the streetscape's built out, sidewalks, trees. Yes, it has maybe some metal buildings that are tradesman storage, but then it transitions to residential. And as you come through, back up to Route 6, so a long way of saying basically what Mary and I and Ted came up with, we adjust the use table for trade park to add in some residential components rather than remap it or try to predict where a street may go and split the lot into two different districts. It seems like there's too many variables for that.
And I would say that this could happen in two ways. One is, and I think this draft does it, allowing top of the shop development. I mean, the trade park may be a place where some of those businesses might want to use their roof line and, go up another story and have workforce housing. So that may not be likely with some of the businesses, but that could be possible. And then have a multifamily, housing at the other end. I mean, I don't know if there's a downside to saying you can have
What's the capacity of the trade park now? Is there, I've been in there a few times over the last 10 years, but not a lot where I could name 3 businesses in there. Is there capacity there for future growth?
It's limited,
It's limited.
And
except for that one giant piece.
Yeah, but there
What's
are a
limited?
lot of public buildings that can be replaced with something different.
As far as new lots, I mean, it's pretty much subdivided out.
Yeah.
And most of the lots,
it seems underutilized. I mean, there seems to be more open space than.
yeah,
big parking
yeah, you're right.
lots,
So I mean,
metal buildings with big empty parking lots.
Yeah.
is what I-
yeah, the redevelopment structurally is there. It's just the lots are subdivided.
What I'm getting at is if you rezone that, you're effectively cutting the trailer park, the trade park in half. So 20 years from now, when some kid's trying to start up a company and needs to rent something, is he not going to be able to do it here in East End because trade park is so small and rents are obviously going to be higher.
That's the.
So we're creating a problem.
Well, I mean, I think if you go back to that market study, though, our trade park is not going, there's a variety of economic reasons why we're going to always have a limited trade park. Just our remoteness,
Yeah.
the workforce, I mean, I think if there's new roadways and sidewalks and upgrades, I think this could be an attractive place for folks, but you're gonna bump into, how do you get there? It's, we're remote and we don't have a workforce to sustain it. So I don't see us having this like great potential for an industrial park. I think stuff that's there now can and probably should clearly over the next 20, 30 years be redeveloped.
I think that.
I agree. I don't think we're looking at development in an industrial park where there's light manufacturing.
Yeah.
Moving in. But with GFM moving into Wellfleet into that space, there are people that are looking to get a place to park their equipment and have landscaping businesses throughout the residential areas here that are way overgrown their backyards. And, their trade-off is, well, I don't have to pay rent when I'm going inside my backyard versus you can push them into the trade park.
So what I think I heard you say, I'm gonna be sure I just understood, that we would leave the end of Holmes Road as is, trade park. With the idea that the end of it could have by special permit residential, multifamily.
Yeah, well, we have to treat it as the whole district. We can't,
You can't
we
do
don't want to
spot-
carve
can't
out
do
that
spot
one.
zoning.
But specifically,
Yeah, so we would go, where the change would be in the use table, we would go through and just say which of the residential uses do we think are appropriate?
right,
And it can be by special permit in the trade park and and that's where, so it preserves all the trade park uses, but we add in, so then that could be, again, a variety of things. Someone wants to add some units on top of a building or building up back, or it could just be a straight up residential development on its own.
I have a question on the Teton suggestion. If we switch to transitional commercial, I think there's a problem with the definition of transitional commercial as it's written, not the use table and all that, but the purpose of transitional commercial is to allow for small scale commercial and residential uses. I think the small scale was intended to apply to commercial, not to the residential. I think you just need to flip those two phrases.
I think we're trying to avoid changing all of those definitions because of the commission,
Okay,
which would be, but I don't know.
These defined tradition, these definitions defined by the
Yeah.
Cod Commission.
Yeah.
Okay.
They're embedded in the, but I don't think I think you're concerned about it's small residential,
small scale residential.
but I think we've also made a use table that you can have more
I understand.
density.
I just want to be clear as in
Yeah.
our discussion
Yeah.
that the small scale doesn't apply to the residential.
Yeah.
If we change Teton to transitional commercial.
Yeah.
And that would be the intent of
Yeah.
the commission.
I can read it that way. I think I read it that way. It's for small scale commercial and residential.
I think so. I'm
Yeah.
just wanting to be sure.
Yeah, I
Well-
don't see that as saying small scale residential.
Okay, good.
And
I think that covers all the map changes.
The roadway map,
The roadway map, I think we discussed earlier, so this is the regulating plan that would basically, this sets up when the development is gonna come in and we start talking about site layout and if it's whether it's on Route 6 or Brackett or one of these to be created streets. What's the width? What are the roadway widths? What are the sidewalk requirements, street trees, outdoor amenity spaces? That ties into the design guidelines.
my one question on this is the proposed primary street from Brackett over to Massasoit. All the others have a connection that dumps one primary to another to make loops and so forth. But this is going to infer dumping a lot of traffic onto Massasoit at an intersection that's already complicated.
It's more related to the streetscape treatments. So basically, that's just a simple road, and what we would like to do over time is, make some improvements, add street trees, add sidewalks. So that's really what we're trying to do, is make the connections on the
Okay.
sidewalk down to Massasoit.
Mhm. Yeah,
It's not really increasing the opportunity for volume. It's really just making it.
it's still
nicer.
office residential,
Yeah,
which,
Right.
yeah,
and several of them are pre-existing non-conforming, so they,
Right.
we wouldn't get what is it, Brundages? How do you say it? Brundage?
Frontage.
Yeah, like Brundage is a non-conforming, he's not gonna be able, you couldn't have another one of those,
Right.
nor could you have a Cape Associates, actually, but,
or George O'Brien.
yeah.
What it does do is it introduces, it lets this residential area come into the core area by foot. My bicycle, without all of a sudden, I just rode my bike there yesterday, I think, all of a sudden you're on Route 6.
Right.
There's no sidewalks or anything.
But the converse of that is, because I travel through there a lot, I mean, near there, is that you're coming off Route 6 on bicycle, and all of a sudden you're in Massasoit where there's a lot of traffic. Yeah, particularly in the summer where people use it as a way to get around Route 6 and get around the intersection at Brackett. So it's just something to think about. I'm not saying don't do it.
No, I'm just, it could be, it could be some future phase of.
Right.
Recognizing Massasoit for what it is and saying we really should have a viable sidewalk running down Massasoit.
The other part to that too is that area is office residential. And when you go back to the definition for that, it specifically says no direct access to Route 6. So if redevelopment's gonna happen, we want to make sure that that road,
Right.
because everything's gonna be coming in and out on that road if it's happening there. So we want the road to be built out
Right,
over time to have sidewalks and they look nice.
okay,
And, again, something that's more conceptual, it's outside of our planning is the triangle adjacent to Siemens Bank that comes right there. That's all property owned by Siemens Bank. Now, we are in this plan suggesting that could be a wonderful little parklet, a small park. This is, we can't, and it's actually, I looked at it the other day. It's got enormous tree cover. So it would be a wonderful shade area if you're in a commercial area that had some activity where you could go across the street and take that ice cream cone or the cup of coffee and whatever. Again, this is private property, so we're not stipulating this, but we're putting it out as a concept, but we're allowing a parklet to be in that district, so it's allowed, it's possible, but maybe not,
But that'd be something that the town would have to sort of negotiate with.
the town would have to negotiate with the bank.
Is there an opportunity to create an open
Yeah.
space there? And-
Yeah.
Well, sort of like the park that's in front of Village Nassau Green. We negotiated that with them. And actually, they were able to get some funding, I think, from the town to help create the park
Yeah.
because it's open space.
It'd be great if we could do that because it essentially creates a gateway to the village center. I mean, you could have a nice monument sign,
Oh, you could have a monument
just
sign,
flowers.
you could have public art
And
in
that
there,
would
you could
make
have
people stop and think, well, let's
passive areas,
check
yeah,
it out.
Mhm.
so,
The other thing that should be mentioned is that, the town has been working on a design for the parallel street to Route 6 on the east side, connecting, at the bank, Cape Cod 5, at Brackett Road, all the way potentially down to Teton. And so what that does, again, it takes a lot of the traffic off of Route 6 potentially. And it creates sort of, blocks, open opportunities for future development. And the town obviously owns, 2 big parcels there too, so that can make a big difference too, and that could be a beautiful little street, sort of sort of fill out the whole downtown village center.
I think that and the Holmes Road extension are huge wins.
Yeah,
if you think about, I was looking at some things, just even in Boston, like looking at that connector road and depending upon, you're gonna have, like, for example, landscape fence. If that connector road went through, they would not only have a new back frontage,
Mhm.
but they own the land across the street. So now you've given them 2 additional frontage in terms of
Well, they have 3 frontages.
3 frontages, and then
Yeah.
Route 6. So there's a lot of, so it adds a lot of economic development opportunity for those businesses, but also that street, since it's a behind the street, I mean, you could think of like, I was just up in Boston where, in the summer, they take two blocks of Newbury Street and make them pedestrian only on Sunday
yeah,
afternoons.
that's really nice.
And then there's like this whole thing where people are, so there's a lot of programming opportunities culturally, Christmas walks, Halloween things, that you could really start thinking about some of these things.
And Landmark was open to that concept of connecting through.
Yes, yes.
And they've got a preliminary plan for an artist colony and museum, a cooperative kind of thing.
Yeah. But I think
With a
they,
gallery.
but I think they, well, I don't know what they're gonna do, but it was
Yeah,
interesting,
yeah,
when they
yeah.
saw the direction that the zoning was going, one of their development advisors said to the guys, we may wanna think about this, because, I mean, the wheels started turning like,
There's a lot of value
there's
to
a
that
new
land.
opportunity here with this new
Yeah.
zoning, and they were kind of, he was like, don't get too wedded to this, why don't we rethink this whole thing, so,
In housing.
and whatever, yeah.
Okay.
I just
Moving on.
met with them again last week and to follow up, and so
Yeah.
they see the potential and they're comfortable with us.
Yeah.
Sharing they're comfortable with us, with their
Yeah.
property being in this thing when we start talking about it in public, so.
Yeah.
The challenge might be getting past Williams, right? But at the same time, it crosses it at a point where you've basically got 3 good lots along Route 6 for redevelopment, and it basically keeps intact what's behind it, and what happens behind it, we don't really know, but
Well, it gives Willie, I mean, Willie owns that
it just makes it part
paddleboard
of the
thing.
connection,
It's the same thing with Landmark.
right?
It gives them two frontages there,
Exactly.
and maybe even 3, depending upon how it goes back.
She also was, I wouldn't say supportive, but she's interested. So
Okay. Use table?
Use table?
one more thing about this map, Route 6 itself, obviously the town is working with the Cape Cod Commission, and they've got an engineer that's looking at it. At this point, the cross section looks like it's gonna be, it's gonna have, trees, and on one side it's gonna be a multi-purpose, pathway, and the other one a sidewalk.
Which is this? Which side is this?
Route 6.
Oh,
Yeah.
the state,
Yeah.
the state plan.
Sure.
Is that in front of, are you negotiating, or is the town negotiating with DOT at this point? Has that been submitted?
We're going to be meeting with District 5 Mass DOT.
Okay,
And then once we get the sign off on the concepts, we can start getting into formal preliminary design and start getting on the tip and all that stuff.
all right,
Sooner the better for the good.
use table.
Well, I think, do we want to just discuss the trade park piece
Oh,
now?
Sure,
So, because the kind of first page on the use table is where all the residential uses are. So if you look at the trade park column,
they're not allowed.
they're not allowed. So this would really be looking at townhouses, multifamily attached,
Mixed use.
and mixed use. And then those could be allowed in the trade park via special permit.
So, and on the, am I reading the use table correctly? Anything that says no now could be by special permit given an exception, or does it have to say SP?
It has
We
to
would
say
put
SP.
Okay. So you would put SP for the trade park, what would become SP? I mean,
Townhouse, multifamily, attached,
Greater than 3.
greater than 3, and mixed use building or development.
If someone wanted to do top of the shop.
okay, right. Okay,
And no cottage community or.
No, I mean, going back to your, I mean, I guess we're not trying to encroach necessarily on the trade park with a lot of residential. This is just that widget of that end of Holmes Road has just, you've got an RV park here and you've got potentially a new road, and it backs onto a bike trail that backs over to the transfer station. So as far as sort of, if you did a 60, I don't know, saying, making this up, but if you did a 65 unit rental development back there, you can't see it from 6. You're not encroaching on any neighborhood. And you've got roadway access. So our goal here was just to try to leave an option. And the option might not, because it's dependent upon the road. We might be talking about an option that gets realized 10, 15 years from now.
Oh, right, and it could come in.
Yeah, it could,
Comes in from it, maybe else.
Yeah.
And I think also if you go to page 11, the use table, so that would be for principal uses, and the question is, do we want to allow that for accessory use, which I think we do. Because then that would be the existing commercial building that wants to add a residential component, so we could allow an accessory dwelling unit.
is that you couldn't get that in mixed use? Would that not be a mixed use?
Well, it would depend on the nature of the project. So if someone already had one of those metal buildings that's there now and they're not touching that, they just want to add a unit.
Oh, they want
It's
to,
not-
they want to put a tiny house out back for.
Right, but the residential component is still accessory. Mixed use is like you get two principal uses.
Okay.
It's even. Accessory is still the primary use is the
see, I
commercial.
see.
They just want to add.
So someone had a landscape business, and they had 3 apartments upstairs for seasonal workers. That's not allowed right now,
No,
and to allow something like that. What would you'd have to change the,
Is that accessory or is that? mixed use?
that would be,
well,
That'd
it
be-
depends on. there's a definition for accessory, which goes to what's the percentage of use of the building and or the lot? It's 40%.
30%.
Yeah, so it just depends. If someone could, so that building and then you're building a whole new second floor and maybe it's 50-50 when you actually break it down. So that would be a mixed use. So that would be covered under principal. But if it's just one unit that they want to add and it's only 10%, in order to allow that, we would have to also correspondingly allow that as an accessory use.
So we need to make changes to make that happen, right?
So in order to do that, the changes we just made on principal, and then when you go to the accessory uses on page 11.
Yeah.
We would change accessory dwelling unit to SP,
Right,
apartment located above a permitted commercial use, that's highlighted in green, SP,
So instead of yes, it would be SP.
yeah,
yeah. And it's currently X.
but we need a performance standards that says it can only be 10% of the building space.
30%.
That's
No,
definition.
It's already in there.
Already in there, okay.
And then
Yeah, the
it's-
current bylaw has a definition for accessory,
Okay.
and it's basically if you go over 40% of the building or the site, it's no longer accessory.
Okay,
So we've got multifamily, mixed use, townhouses, and accessory, which would be by special permit. Okay.
so the apartment located above the permitted commercial use, so basically that's the only difference is the ADUs on the top floor. Is that how that's gonna work?
Or it could be a standalone,
Yeah, ADU can be standalone.
could be a tiny house in the back.
Yeah. An apartment located above the permitted. Could be considered
Mixed use.
no, I was trying to say it could be considered a form of an ADU, but it's not. Because there's not a primary residence. That's why it's differentiated the way it is.
Right, yeah.
So I had to back into the logic. You got, a definition has accessory twice, which is why it's
Mm.
a little bit confusing.
Can I mention one other thing? Are we all set on that? Larry, okay. We need to, one of the outstanding pieces of business we need to do, we've done research. We didn't have the wherewithal to come with a proposal, is formula businesses. I mean, we have a formula business restriction, but it's kind of a statement of intent without any detail or requirements. We've looked at P-Town, we've looked at Wellfleet, we've looked at Concord, we've looked at this one other one, but anyways, it's really interesting. The Wellfleet one, which a select board member told me that it has gone to court and it's been upheld, but they have an outright ban on fast food restaurants. I mean, that's really their formula business. It basically says fast food restaurants are prohibited. So I put that out there as food for thought. That's theirs.
I have a comment on that, as we were talking about also, that with these drive-throughs.
Mhm.
And one thing we learned, not just because of COVID, but also this term of ghost kitchens. You know, when you order from your favorite restaurant, like in New York, it's not coming from your favorite restaurant. It's coming from this ghost kitchen where he's
Yeah.
representing a bunch of restaurants. But the idea that we're moving as a society, say, hey, I'm gonna order my food and I want to swing by and pick it up. Well, we know we're gonna go to Shaw's to do that, but I could see where there could be something here in town where somebody says, I made take out business only. And it might be a, formula business. Is that, that's not a McDonald's, that's not, is that, how do we distinguish between that and fast food?
Take out it, well,
That's allowed.
takeout is allowed.
We actually have a
Takeout.
definition for it.
We have definition for takeout and teaser parking and different things like that.
Take out only.
The drive-through is just the the Dunkin' Donuts, the McDonald's drive-through, that is prohibited now and would keep that. That's a very big point of concern with the commission. But we have takeout that you could do now.
Yeah, takeout, we have a definition for takeout only that's allowed.
And it's on too.
Right, I was getting at, but can we, if you're a takeout only business, can you have a drive-through?
No,
No.
under this, it will be.
Again, I think we're caught in. You know, we're defining what we think of a drive-through, which is, 30 cars waiting to get their coffee at Starbucks. As opposed to saying, this is something that you've ordered ahead of time and you come and pick it up and you're gonna go on your way. Like if CVS has a prescription and you want to go to the CVS window, pick up the prescription, or we guys there as well.
Yes,
That would be.
I mean, it's driven by traffic considerations and it's driven by traffic considerations and the queuing of that. It also drives more formula businesses, which we're not prohibited, but de-incentivizing.
I have one more question on the table. If we're switching tea time to transitional, then multifamily attached dwellings are only by special permit. Because that's what tea time is gonna be. Hopefully.
Right.
Well, we have that multifamily attached is special permit in all areas, just
Okay.
given the
Multifamily attached.
complexity of it, nature of it.
I'm just
Yeah.
asking to be sure. That the intent isn't, no, the intent is, it's because it's a complex project, it's gonna take a special permit.
Mhm.
I think the offset to that is in the density in unit table.
Mhm.
You may need to get a special permit for the intended use. But we're allowing the densities that would be,
By right,
conducive by right, so you'd have to come in and it'd really be more about all the moving parts. You wouldn't have to argue the point of, I want these units, I want to have these units. I
Depending on
can,
the size and height.
yes, you would come in off the top. I'm allowed to have whatever it is, 16 units. So we don't have to argue about that. It was just more of like, okay, but how are these going to fit on the site and the circulation, all the other moving parts? I think that works out. That's a good, I'm glad you raised that point, actually, because it's good to make sure.
Mhm.
Because one of the things we heard from the developers is that it's important to allow these things by right, because you're reducing their red tape and everything. So actually, it's a good point. I want to make sure that that's
Right, because it's,
like, they love that. Oh, if you're saying I can, this is my density by right, and I don't have to argue that point.
and I can do, it's not just tea time,
Yeah.
but in that whole area,
Mhm. Mhm.
that's transitional commercial.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think
You
we're
wanna
doing,
look at that, table?
I think we're doing a lot of bold things with housing,
Right.
that we're getting good feedback.
So,
Throwing everything in as a special permit is always the fallback of, seems a little risky. Better make it a special permit, because then you have some sort of control on it, so, and there's merit to that, so. You just want to make sure that, I don't want to shoot ourselves in the foot, the same thinking, oh, we're allowing all this stuff, but then we're still.
Climbing out of hoops.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, actually, because I hadn't thought about this.
Should we at least think about it before we say sold? And maybe that has to do with as much with the wording about special permit process
Mhm.
as it does about saying that. I think that saying special permit would make, from a community perspective, where people are very worried about what
Scale.
these multifamily and scale and
Mhm.
traffic
Yeah.
and et cetera. I think it would make people comfortable to know that it's an extra level of review that goes into those projects. But if we're talking about, say, a 4-unit development piece that somebody wants to put in, say, just look at the map to see where transitional commercial goes and ends. But one of the other pieces in the transitional commercial, they wanted to put in a 4-unit building. If they had it by right and it matched all the other requirements, they might do that on the back of one of those lots. You know, particularly if you put in the new street.
Well, if we have all of these form-based code pieces in there, that's baking in that the architecture and the site layout and the landscape and the buffering,
Right,
do we really need, question? Do we need to then also require that the use be special permit? We just say it's a multifamily attached dwelling is allowed by right. The only way you're actually gonna get it approved is when you come in and show us that you've met all the
Yeah, that
form-based
was-
code. So I guess there's two ways,
I would
that
be-
we have less than 3 and then greater than 3.
Actually, they both are listed as greater than 3. We
Oh.
gotta make an edit here.
yeah,
Yeah,
there's only multifamily greater than 3. Oh, no, there's less than 3.
What is less, multifamily
No, they're
less
the
than 3?
same.
It's like a,
multifamily attached dwelling less than or equal to 3 units.
Right, and the one below is
Yeah.
the same thing.
Right, I
needs
think
to
that's supposed
change.
to be multifamily attached dwelling greater than.
They both say greater than I'm.
they both
They
say
both
greater
say
than,
greater, so the first one should be less than.
first one should be less than,
Oh, sorry, yeah.
Okay, so which one is less than?
the top one,
top one.
but they're both
Yeah.
highlighted the same way.
Yeah,
Right,
And I would be fine as of right, given what Paul just said about all the architectural detail that has to be.
right. Well, I certainly think that whatever the lower one is, if it's 2 or less,
actually,
if it's less than 3, is that 2 or you can't have one multifamily, so.
That's a
just-
duplex.
It's a
Actually-
duplex.
it's a duplicate is what it is,
It's a duplicate?
because a multifamily itself
Yeah.
is 3 or more units.
Multifamily less than 3.
So with the first one should
Yeah.
be, is it still, let's see, are they still?
Yeah, no,
Family, they're all,
yeah, it's just a
that's true.
duplicate, so.
it's a duplicate.
So
So we need-
it's a du-
Yeah,
it's
just,
a
yeah,
dupo.
so we need to get that,
All right, so the first one
Bingo.
come out,
yeah, the first one.
Well, first one comes out, okay.
okay, and then,
Yeah, because it's going from low scale to,
Yeah.
you know.
so then the one we're keeping later on is multifamily attached greater than or less than 3.
Greater than 3.
Greater than
Great, I
three.
mean, sorry, greater than or equal to 3,
Yeah, yeah.
and then that,
3 or more.
and then that would be by right.
Yeah,
Okay, so you're
Well,
gonna change it
for
to
the-
by right?
We're making it,
Wait,
wait,
greater than 3 or the duplex?
the greater than 3.
I thought Carolyn was asking about the duplex.
So the duplexes are already
No,
by right.
I meant
Yeah.
the bigger one.
Okay,
so, we're in transition,
yes.
And transition commercial, yes, that would
we
be,
want to make that by right,
In core commercial and in transition.
Is it by right across the board?
it's special permit across the board now.
right,
But what do we want it to do?
I mean, I think when you get out to, I mean. I think when you get out to limited commercial and office residential.
Office residential, I would, that's sort of the definition, right? It's,
I think the logic would prevail for all of the sub-districts then, because if we got all these
Yeah.
checks in place with the site
Right.
development,
Yeah,
why do we make
To
them
make it-
go through
yeah,
the special
Special
permit?
permit.
so make it yes,
that would be my thought.
And like I said, the fallback is always.
Yeah.
Forget negative reaction.
Kevin, do you have any feeling one way or the other?
Nope.
Okay,
That was a good catch.
continuing on, other comments about the use table?
I have one on page 11. Under recreational uses. Athletic club, fitness center and gym. Versus sports complex. They're treated differently. And I
Yeah.
wasn't quite sure.
I think the note was that an athletic club could be something smaller, like a Pilates studio or something.
Sports complex would be like a, you know.
We put a soccer facility or what is that?
Baseball.
Yeah, the definition was public or sports complex, public or private facilities for team, individual sports, tournaments, or other athletic activities. And
Yes, it could be like the Little League complex.
Okay,
You're looking at recreation.
Athletic club is,
Those,
athletic club is,
Town, state, or federally or privately owned facility. Used for purposes of indoor or outdoor recreation.
swimming pools, tennis courts.
So we're kind of talking about really like things.
mhm.
Well, I guess I look at Willie's as more, that's like a more of a. That's a sports complex. I mean, they got pools, courts, rock climbing.
they're not team sports, right? They're
Yeah.
just,
No, I guess the distinction I would think is just, yeah, there's a large scale sports complex. Then there's like your neighborhood gym, fitness center, and your Pilates studio and your yoga places, which I would think of as an athletic club, fitness center, gym would be those smaller scale.
Yeah, but they're not always. No.
Well,
I guess that's,
I mean, I'm thinking Boston Athletic Club.
Like a single use, like a soccer field is used for soccer. Baseball field is used for baseball and a team sport, you know, like,
Right,
even though
that's-
you've got. The smaller scale Pilates or whatever, and you've got some massive places, my son used to work for in Framingham. And there was 4 levels and on top to it,
Lifetime
it
Fitness,
was, sorry,
Lifetime Fitness,
exactly.
gigantic, yeah.
And massive, but basically it's just like able to grow gym.
Right.
You know,
so what does a Pilates studio, a yoga studio, something like that fit into?
I think it fits under the same definition as just a matter of
Yeah,
scale.
just measure scale.
As
Athletic
athletic club,
club,
fitness
yeah.
center, okay.
Can we just put square footage in there then? Do we own the definitions, by the way? We can
Yeah.
change
Yeah.
definitions.
Yeah.
Definitions.
I think it might be nice to be a little bit more clear. When you look at sports complex, public or private facility, team or individual sports tournaments, that's really vague. If what we're thinking about a sports complex, if you could say, you know, 10,000 feet under roof, something like that, minimum. Or something for next season. Or, I think we have an idea that within a walkable neighborhood with a coffee shop and a restaurant and housing, having a yoga studio or something like that, it's it. 6 or 7, or 12 cars maybe, or something like that, as opposed to a Willis. One, I don't see with the definitions, Willis can slip into either one of these.
So the performance standards down further, we would want to say scale in different districts, I think, something like that.
Well, I think we need a middle of the sports complex. I'm thinking about like up on Route 1 in Millwood, they have that new thing and it's popping up everywhere. It's a pretty big facility, actually. There's a lot of parking. That indoor golf,
Alcohol?
Mhm.
Top
Oh,
golf,
they're everywhere.
yeah, they're everywhere now.
Yeah,
And
that would be an example.
I wish they were everywhere, but yeah, that.
no, but that's like a huge, is that a sports complex?
Yes.
Yeah, so that would be, a-
Dining. I went to it a couple months ago with my nephews. They are a huge eyesore. I mean, the
they're,
lighting that you see from that.
yeah,
Yeah,
It's interesting. Yeah, it's really a nightlife. I was surprised. There's
Yes.
as many people coming there.
who don't golf?
They're coming for the bars and restaurants.
right,
and-
that's right.
and hanging out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, but that
Watching
would
the
be, if they're bars and restaurants, that's mixed use. It's
well,
not
they'd have
just a
to add
sports
that,
complex.
yeah, they'd have to add.
Right.
That's an accessory use they'd have to add.
Yes,
Because Willie's has, I don't know if they have a bar, they have a restaurant.
in the juice bar and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Diversity.
so maybe we put a pin in this, that's something that needs
This
some
is sport
further,
complex versus athletic.
either definition or in the guidelines,
Yes,
needs to be more clear.
we put a lot of pins in things that we gotta track down on some. We can't keep putting pins on things.
And we pop a
which-
bubble, and
I was
then
thinking-
comes up over here.
I'm done.
No, I'm only kidding. It's just like last winter, let's put a pin in this, we'll figure it out.
What is minor?
Okay, go ahead.
I'm sorry, where did I see it? There's one spot on here. Oh, on page 7. Under residential, 2-family or duplex dwellings, there's a, one, that's like a footnote.
Yeah, that's from a previous amendment. We changed that a couple years ago
Right,
to allow
right,
duplexes.
so,
So that's at the end of the zoning bylaw, they have all those.
yeah, you understand that, but do we need the footnote there?
Yes,
We do? Well, we should have the proper reference, though. There's like a couple of hundred of them in the back of the bylaw, right?
Right,
So we gotta figure out which one that is.
I mean, like the ADU one doesn't have a footnote.
What,
right, because it wasn't changed. The footnotes refer to prior year amendments. So in the full zoning bylaw, yeah, actually, it's in here.
Yes, I
I-
saw that, yeah. I know
and it's
that.
just a reference to that place in the back.
Okay.
I took it out of there because I didn't think it was
No,
necessary,
we
but
gotta
if we,
have to have it.
but if we have the reference, it's gotta be the one like 203 or whatever it is in the back of the bylaw.
So the either should all be in or all be out.
Yeah.
I'm not sure where you're at,
Well,
I
because
don't-
there's like, the definition of ADUs, we did that 2 years ago. And so it should have a footnote of when that was adopted.
but we didn't change that in the use table.
Right.
So elsewhere in the bylaw where we changed the ADU, there's a
Yes, sir.
footnote there,
Okay,
but we didn't change anything related to that in the,
You
still in
use
the
table.
duplexes,
that was a
It's just-
specific change to that use
Gotcha.
table.
got it, okay.
Just one thing on the athletic, should we amend the athletic club to like put in some examples of yoga studio? Because
We have yoga studios in the town now, so how are they being operated? There's one right in Tula, right in next to near Casa del Cabo, that strip mall.
I would assume, yeah, they fall under athletics, but I guess it just never really had a reason to look at that
Why don't we,
before, so I
just for purposes of moving on, do you wanna noodle on these two definitions and come back?
What do you use today? I mean, because the only thing under recreation is conservation, open space.
I think there's some research that needs to be done to figure that out.
All right, yeah, we can get comment on it.
Anything else in the use table before we go on? Okay, the next section is the regulations of floor and frontage backlot. And oh, this is an important thing. It comes up later in the dimension. And we kicked this around, well, we talked about it last year. But this, we've been thinking about the housing that could be built in this commercial zone, whether it's top of the shop or back lot. Back lot, we're defining as what, 100 or 200 feet off Route 6?
That's for the taller buildings.
Yes, but is it 100?
No, it's typically 30 to 50.
No, in our definition here, I think we have 100, when we define back lot. Isn't it 100 feet off of Route 6? There is a definition in here. We should just, anyway, that's not my point. We have been kicking around based on the developer's feedback. Give me, even the top of the shop. It's theoretically, that could get you 2.5 stories at the 30 feet standard we have right now. And if you wanted to get into that attic area with some dormers, maybe 1 or 2 studios. But if we gave them another 5 feet, it with the pitch, it really gives you the opportunity, you might be talking about 4 to 6 units up on that top area.
Right.
So similarly, when we heard the feedback from developers about the multifamily rental housing, please, it's gotta be at least 3 feet, 3 stories. The smallest we can go to get to 3 stories is 39 feet. So now you've got front buildings and back buildings, one of which, if you build housing, you can go up another 5 feet. In the back, if you can build housing to get the 3rd floor, you get the extra 9 feet. We justify it as being back. One of the things we did with the hotel motel conversion, and we discussed it with the back front lot buildings, is this notion of allowing it the use for year-round rental housing or long-term seasonal workforce housing. That's the same language we put in the motel conversion. And that's what we've proposed here. It's almost like saying there's sort of a density or a housing bonus.
Right.
If you want to build housing on top of your shop, or if you want to take the back of your lot and build rental housing, you would get that bonus by right if it was year round, versus the examples we saw
That's
in Howard, for example, where they did top of the shop housing, but they made them 1,200 square foot units and they sold them as luxury condominiums. So it kind of defeats the purpose to give the extra height if you're trying to incentivize that workforce kind of housing.
So that would be accomplished by,
So basically we're taking the height and calling it the bonus.
right,
It's a housing bonus.
Right.
And
and so it would come with the deed restriction.
yeah, well, theoretically, we'd have to ask Carolyn that, but I think it'd be that's what it'd be permitted for. So you couldn't get a permit for short-term rental. Because you would have to get
Okay,
a
so-
permit for short-term rental.
Yeah, however, that would be.
Yeah,
Procedurally accomplished,
Yeah.
yes. I think that's having that housing bonus for workforce housing, for seasonal, full-time housing and season housing, I think is awesome. Anything we can do.
I don't, I mean, the height issue was what the developer said makes the numbers work for them.
Right.
And we're trying to align it with the fact that we've lost those 300 units of rental housing. And how do we, I mean, if we have it wide open, I mean, we're going to defeat our purpose here if we can build luxury condos all day long and sell them all day long, but it's not going to meet the other strategic goals of the town. So that's what's on the table. People have, Kevin, do you have a
Well, I
thought?
over time, I do change my mind on some things.
We're allowed to do
And I
that.
was, since we started this, I was like, no more than so many feet. I'm okay with boosting the height. So long as they are not going to be complex, but they're for rental housing, for workforce housing, stuff like that. I think.
Yeah, I mean, we're not proposing here that these be deed restricted, affordable outside of the inclusionary zoning. I mean, inclusionary zoning would have 20% of your units be affordable. But, so we're not saying everything has to be affordable, but by virtue of year-round housing and smaller scale housing in a commercial district, we're hoping, and I guess we'll get this feedback from the community and from developers that, I mean, I think it's economically viable. It's a certain kind of developer though, because if you're building luxury condos, you build it, you get your money, you get out. You don't have a long-term commitment to
Right.
property management.
So is the implication that it has to be full-time residents,
With year-round rentals.
year round, right? Or seasonal,
Long-term seasonal,
long-term
meaning you could
Workforce.
workforce.
Yeah, so it's, you rent
Workforce
it
is
for,
the key to the definition.
you do it for 90 days,
But I think the definition of workforce in the definitions is not correct.
There is a definition elsewhere in the bylaw for seasonal workforce. So we we're gonna relocate that to definitions, because there's two different, there's the workforce where it relates to the affordability.
Right,
We don't want that. That's not the one that would apply here. This is talking about terms of lease.
okay, right,
So we want this to be, you get the bonus if you're going to be year-round rental or a seasonal workforce rental, which is defined as no less than
That's
6
not in
months.
there, but it's just something we just.
It's not in,
we just
it's not in
started
that.
Okay.
definition.
Work out the other day.
because
It's-
the-
So if you look at
I
the.
know,
the
it's
table
embedded,
We looked
here,
at the definitions and realized they weren't
it's embedded
appropriate.
in
We haven't
the,
done that.
Okay,
it's embedded in
It's
the
okay.
inclusionary, I'm sorry, it's embedded in the motel conversion section of the bylaw. When we
Right.
did that, we put it right in there.
right,
I'm just gonna, we're gonna
Okay.
duplicate it. It's gonna stay there. I'm just gonna take the exact
Okay,
same,
okay.
duplicate it in section 21.
so the definition in the definitions that we have is not right,
Right.
okay,
We'll have the correct one in.
yeah, okay, got it,
There'll be two workforce ones.
yes,
They're doing different things.
Mary, the concern about owning luxury condos, they're not, part of that can be defined by the size of the units, in the sense that you're not gonna be building a luxury condo for 600 square feet. So if we're trying to get a density going aside, I guess, can we put limitations as to how big those units can be, to sort of wait out?
We do
did.
have that. We do have that, yeah.
we just haven't gotten to
Yeah,
that.
I mean, there are smaller units. I mean, and the goal here is to, again, again, you might have one unit in a building that would be, have to meet the affordability restrictions, but the notion is by the size of the units and the target population, you're not renting them for $6,000 a week as a seasonal flip, you're gonna have to get what the market will bear. And living on top of a restaurant, an urban kid might not mind living on top of a restaurant, but other people might.
And these days, there's a lot of people, there's such a shortage right now.
There's such a shortage of housing right now.
Yeah.
And, and I think one of the things we heard even last time out is, there's a little bit of a third rail with going, there's a 30-foot height limit around town, and, a lot of people feel very strongly about that, so
I know.
trying to, I know, but trying to contain that, to be able to say, this is the place where we're gonna have density. This is a place where, I mean, really, what's gonna front Route 6 or front Bracket Road with the 5-foot height limit, I mean, I'm 5'5", so it's a little shorter than me, it's not like, you're not going up,
It's about my size.
You can-
yeah.
Are there any other parts of town that fall into these categories?
no. Well, this falls into just this.
All that you see.
Yeah, it's all the
Part of-
ECDC.
Yeah, so.
Part of the narrative to this, when we do this outreach and explain this, is gonna be this zoning is accounting for where can the development happen on the private properties. 'Cause we only have a limited amount of town properties, and even if we maxed out 100%, as much as it still wouldn't account, so the housing has to be, the rest of it has to come on private development, and then the only way it's gonna happen is if, based on what we're hearing, is no one's gonna build what we need unless we give them these allowances, and again, we're doing that backlot setback from Route 6, insert with all of the design
The buffers
aesthetics,
and
the
everything.
buffers. So that's really, and this will get raised because it is a third rail. Unless the temperature in the community has really changed, which maybe it has, but anytime, 35 feet is always a lightning rod, and we're doing 35 and 39, so that's why the communicating the reason.
Mhm.
You really gotta
Really
push the
important.
housing needs, but
Yeah.
people know this is the only way to do it.
Well, I somewhat beg to differ about that a little bit. Yes, pushing the housing needs is really important, and explaining why, from an economic perspective, that extra 5 or 10 feet is needed. I think the reality is that there's a core group of people in town who just, it doesn't matter the logic of it. They're just gonna say no to anything over 30 feet, anything over 25 feet, whatever that is embedded in their mind. And we just need to try to reach out to be sure that as many people that are open to logic as possible can come along with the logic of that. Can I make just one really quick comment on page 17? You can, Ted, you can look at this later. E3, I think there's a word left out. Parking may be permitted on public along the street frontage.
17?
E3 on page 17.
Okay.
It's not a debate, it's just, I think you're missing one.
All right, I'm just cognizant of the time, 6:25. We
I think it would be,
would be good to go to next performance standards or,
I think the table.
I think the tables
Yeah.
are the
Okay,
crux of
yeah.
a lot of this.
Okay.
stuff.
okay. So the next table after that one is the, okay, we're at the building placement, separation, coverage and buffers,
Mhm.
What page?
5.1. I don't have pages on my
Section 5.1.
figure,
Yes.
five,
Page 30.
5.1, building placement, separation, coverage and buffers.
Okay.
So from our earlier discussion, we made three or four changes. I can't remember what they were, and I can't remember why.
Just
we
the green.
proposed it. Yeah, the
The
green.
green,
Yeah, can you,
we
Okay.
just,
I'm sorry, what page are you on?
page 30,
30?
the chart, building placement. Yeah. We wanted to differentiate Route 6
Oh,
from
yes,
Brackett
yes,
and the
yes, yes,
secondary
yes.
roads. To make sure that the setbacks were appropriate.
Mhm.
because I think if you look at the complete street concepts that Ted has proposed, where you have the ability to have outdoor seating, pedestrian bike paths,
Activation area.
the whole activation area. The concept is great, except you've got to, you're right up on Route 6. And
Right.
so we had to really, and knowing some recent feedback, for example, that the police and fire chiefs, really took a very hard line against pop-up trucks being close to Route 6, just for safety reasons, the notion of a car jumping the curb and, potentially children and kids there. So that it was adjusted basically for a safety reason to say, okay, if we're gonna have all of this activity, we need to be back a bit on Route 6.
So it's 20, minimum of 20 feet.
Mhm.
That's the house. I mean, that's the building. But as far as outdoor seating and other activation types, that's gonna be 100 feet back.
Is that a different table?
No, I'm just adding it right now, because it's just something we talked about. We haven't sort of integrated into
Okay,
it is at the end, but I think it should be on this table.
So activation would be 100 feet,
Yeah,
so
activation is 100 feet? No, 100 feet we were talking about was the back lot. How's it? I don't think
we're
100,
talking about, no, if somebody's on Route 6 and have frontage zone between 20 and 50 feet,
Yeah.
what we're saying is that you can't have a cafe in front of the building. We want it to be back 100 feet.
The minimum, so on Route 6, the minimum your building setback and minimum can be 20 feet. So
So it
you're
could
at
be-
Route 6, the front of the building's back 20 feet. We don't want your sidewalk cafe, your cafe stuff to be,
in that 20.
because then you're, yeah,
Right.
then
so
you're in
if
the,
you want the sidewalk cafe, you gotta put the building further back.
yeah, or
Right.
have
Or-
it to the side or
To the
back.
side.
Or if it's a longer
Okay.
building, it could be set.
Okay.
It's just gonna
Right,
be-
but the minimum isn't 100 feet.
No. No, the minimum is 20, maximum is 50.
No, I think
For the
what,
building.
That's the.
what Ted's gonna add into this table is
Activation.
the activate, so there's your
right.
building,
Activation has to
there's
be
your
added.
frontage building setback, and then there's gonna be your activation
Yeah,
Setback.
amenity setback.
yeah,
So that,
and it's reinforced in the last section too.
But my question is the activation setback 100 feet
Yeah,
minimum?
from the right of way, yeah. The Route 6 right of way.
So how wide is this room? Roughly, is this 100 feet?
No.
20 maybe.
Oh, but it's
20, 30?
But,
It's 35.
100
if you take
seems,
it, 20%, this isn't 100 feet.
yeah, okay, 100 seems awfully long, that's a third of,
That's the minimum.
yeah, I mean, you're gonna lose so much of. So much,
You won't have anything.
yeah, there won't be anything.
No
left to build.
opportunity for anything other than a store. If there's anything like umbrellas or chairs or bike racks, that all has to be within 100 feet of the road.
It has to be set back a minimum of 100 feet.
Yeah, that just seems too much.
Well, basically, if this is the right of way right here, Route 6, we're talking about Route 600.
I understand.
So this is your setback, there's
20 feet.
20 feet to 50 feet, right? It's actually coming from the fire department, right? That you can't put this in the front, you have to put it on the side at least 100 feet back from Route 6. Bracken Road is different, so this is,
the feedback we've gotten, especially post-COVID, where folks were trying to do the outdoor seating and they want picnic tables. There's just the sensitivity to the speeds that are traveled. If a car jumps the curb, go-
Sorry.
yeah, it's just,
So
and
the new Hog Island, the beach, whatever they're calling it, that's, they have music there, food there. That's
I guess,
15 feet off that.
Yeah, yes.
right, to be fair, I mean, there's 100 feet isn't. That,
What?
there's nothing magic about 100 feet, but it's more that ample space.
I
For a
don't disagree
setback.
with that. I'm
So,
just thinking.
Whether it's
I think
50 feet,
too.
100 feet,
I
or,
do too.
I-
I think it should be, is there an appropriate barrier between the travel lanes and the activation? So that could be street trees, that could be a
Right, right, right.
guardrail, it could be bollards, there's lots of ways to protect people in front of a building. I don't think it needs to be just a,
Well, I don't think it has to be 100 feet. I would feel like half of that would be,
but I think it's putting something in front of it so it doesn't go directly into the cafe
where do we address this currently in the bylaw? Is that in the
at the
performance?
end.
Yeah,
Yeah,
At the
we put
activation.
activation at the end.
all right, let's.
so why don't we,
Let's
well,
think-
we don't, we have a minimum setback in the activation in that table?
Yeah, I put it into that,
Okay.
yeah. There's
Yeah.
outdoor cafes.
I'm
Right,
gonna
what is it?
suggest-
I'm
It
sorry,
doesn't have to
what
be
is-
for displays or
I'm gonna
stuff
put a
like that.
pin in
It's just
this
the
one
outdoor
that we
cafe.
have
I mean,
to
if
look
you're
at
putting people in
timing.
front,
No, I'm just saying, do we specify, and where it is now, is there 100 feet in there?
I put it at the end.
Okay, so I think we can change it
Change that.
there. It doesn't need to,
Doesn't need to be here
I
at
think
all.
we just change it to an appropriate number where you already have it. And then the performance standards stipulate that you have to have the protective bollards and all that. kind of
Yeah.
stuff.
Okay, so, okay.
I like,
Well, you might as well do both now. Obviously, you might as well say, if it's less than 100, it has to have some sort of, something protective, but
Yeah.
it's more than,
Yeah.
whatever number we do.
okay. Next table.
I mean, that's that street trees out there. anyway.
The next table is building footprint, height, and articulation standards.
Page you on,
32.
Okay.
So I guess just to recap what we talked about back in the spring when we landed on a big piece of the current bylaw is that you can build an 8,000 square foot footprint, but you can only do that if you build a smaller frontage building, and that becomes prohibitive
Yeah.
with site design costs and all that stuff. So
And the frontage building had to be
In the-
first.
yeah, yeah. So the numbers haven't changed since the spring, so we kind of split the differences here and said you could do up to a 4,500 square foot by right. And then anything up to 4,501 to 7,000, you could do by special permit. Then what that does is if you just wanted to build one 7,000 square foot building, because that's what your
That's all you
program
need.
calls for, that's all you need. You can do that. It's by special permit. But also, all the other moving parts of this is that it's gonna have to, set back a certain, that's where all the architectural standards, it was just to guard against a big 8,000 square foot building just getting
It-
plopped onto the thing with nothing else to mitigate
And
visually.
we're just
So
talking about the floor, the ground floor. space.
just this is just building from,
Footprint,
yeah.
It was a defensive strategy that was put in response to Dollar General to not, if you're gonna do a big building, you have to do a smaller building in front. So with them, we started looking at I'd rather address the formula businesses as separately, as opposed to making a developer need to do two buildings in order to.
Yeah. But he's also at 7,000 square feet. If he's doing 2 stories, that's really a 14,000 square foot building.
That's the footprint, yeah, so it's, like I said. That's really-
And I think that seemed to be in line with a lot of the examples we were
Yeah.
looking at in the spring of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Examples we found of good projects that had the density units for when it was mixed that.
Right.
So anyway, we didn't change anything since the spring, but that was just a reminder why we got.
And the parking has to be to the side.
Right.
And I think
Extreme.
we met with Ted Malone and that woman who I said that architect was fabulous. Do you remember her name? I can't remember her name though. Anyways, we focused on this table and they thought they were very positively inclined to the, floor heights. That she got into the whole conversation of, the 12-foot maximums of the new energy codes and everything. That's,
Imagine, but not, need at least another foot on the roof now.
So the second, so this primary building footprint, and then the second piece, the building height, stories and feet, that's really what we were talking about earlier. This is an important piece. So this is where we're incentivizing. If you're gonna build it, if you're just building a commercial building, retail on the first floor, office space on the second floor, you only get to go 30 feet, 2 stories. But if you're gonna do a mixed use with residential on the second, or all total residential,
Can you go commercial, office, then residential in the top?
well, it's only 2.5 stories, really.
Well, not at 39 stories.
Oh,
if you're
39.
doing the mixed, yeah, so if
We
you're
could do a
doing
mixed use,
mixed use
yeah.
and you had the
Yeah.
residential, you could take advantage of the 35.
So I can have ice cream shop, law office.
Yeah.
Yeah, as long as you get that residential, we just don't want to give, but the person that's just gonna do a restaurant with a law office,
The 2 story, yeah.
yeah, so.
But by going up, you don't have to to get 3 stories, you don't need 2 stories of residential.
No,
Yeah, that's what.
I like that better.
so that's where,
Like,
They had 2 stories of residential.
oh,
yeah,
yeah, we all like it better.
I mean, they can still do that, I suppose, but.
Yeah, they can still do that.
Well, I mean, the other thing that we heard from the folks that are actually doing development is that with the exception of like formula businesses who have just such economics of scale and size, that for local developers, commercial development is a loss leader. It's like,
Right.
people basically said, you don't make money on this. And part of the, one developer said, listen, they asked us about Town Center Plaza and the rents there are $12 a square foot. He said, cannot build a single thing in today's market that at a minimum would have to be $25 to $50 a square foot. And they said, therefore, the kind of strip mall kind of business you saw in the 50s and 60s, the economics, like, as you know, from banking, it completely doesn't work. And the housing is what gives you, especially, and I'm hoping that this is an economic benefit. We want it for to meet the housing needs of Eastham residents that need year-round rental housing, but that is also year-round cash flow. So if you've got a commercial entity that's not, is not your most profitable piece of business, but you've got enough housing that's giving you cash flow for 12 months. I mean, it starts making it much more feasible.
Yeah, I think it's a good point because the seasonality of the stamps business for the most part.
Yeah.
Prohibits too much office or commercial.
Well, I mean, hopefully,
Well, there's such a shortage of housing. I mean,
it's such a,
there's
but
so much
yeah.
Unutilized commercial
yeah,
space, that doesn't make it, that's not just on the Cape, that's everywhere.
Yeah.
Everybody's building on these old shopping malls and.
they're building
the
housing
opportunity, yeah, absolutely.
and it's all
Film
housing.
Centers and.
Yeah. So, I mean, part of looking at this, Kevin, to your point about the seasonality of stuff is, I'm spitballing this. If at tea time, is there 80 units? Is there another maybe 20 units that might be on Town Center Plaza? This Holmes Road, or could we pick up another 50 units? Can a lot of commercial properties, we start picking up units? I mean, it's not going to be 1 or 2 150, developments. It's going to be a lot of scattered site, but if it's all scattered here and it's all walkable,
Yeah.
now you've got not only a workforce availability, but you've got customers. You've infused a couple hundred customers that are going to be able to support those restaurants and shops as well as the rest of the town. So it's kind of linking those economic,
Sort of building some self-sufficiency.
building some self-sufficiency in there, you know? All right,
So that's where the incentives are built into the table. And then, so 35 in core commercial office, and then transition limited trade park is where you could go up to 39. Again, the setbacks for a 39-foot would have to be a minimum 200 feet back from Route 6. But also these districts are the ones that we talked about earlier, where there are those key parcels that are large. You go do all the stuff set way back from Route 6 and have its own little microcosm back there of a nice neighborhood. So that was,
It's also tied to the requirements for workforce housing.
yeah, important, yeah.
Anything over 35 has to be set back and have the workforce.
okay,
So is the 39, 39 is
the
only,
back lot.
yeah, it's the back lot, but it's only if it meets the year-round housing or extended
Mhm.
season housing.
Yes,
So is there someplace in here? that
it's their
says that?
footnotes
Performance standard.
in the
Yeah,
performance.
Okay,
If you look at the. But my question is it 100% workforce? I mean, every multifamily that's gonna be put on any large one, it's all gonna be workforce, no percentage of,
it's not,
We're not putting income. The work,
okay.
it's the year
It's for
round is
year-round.
it's year round.
Oh,
The
okay,
income issues will come in with the inclusionary zoning.
okay.
it's year
I
round.
thought that was tied to it.
No,
Oh, so you have footnotes that they don't.
Yeah.
I see.
Right, we added this.
Yeah, we were fine tuning this yesterday.
We're always fine tuning.
Yep.
do you want to go to,
Yeah, the next table is on page 38,
the 5.8?
5.8,
the density?
residential density units. So again, we're putting in by different building types what you could have by right as your unit density. And then we are,
And that's unit density per acre, correct?
That's per building.
Per building.
Yeah, the first one, townhouses, because that's based on, those are. Some of those, up to 3 attached units, and then there's open space, so that's based on the square footage or 40,000 square feet. But if you're doing a multifamily or a mixed use building, that's based on, the size is based on the number of units. We didn't want to tie it to like a per acre because, we want this to be sort of, a traditional village center where you don't necessarily need to have any more property than you don't need for your given project. So we're just being more efficient with the
I
development.
think it'd be helpful to have an explanatory note
I think so too,
about that.
Okay,
because we're used
What
to
are we
seeing,
calling them?
Just so it explains why that's the 40,000 square feet for that one and
Right.
not the other ones. And then, because
so yeah,
I'd asked that too and I already forgot. And
right.
you explained that to me and then I already forgot.
I don't, I'm sorry, I'm not following on the table what you're talking about.
So under townhouse,
Yeah,
we're saying max residential units per 40,000 square feet.
per acre.
And we don't have that in the other. We have it for
Okay.
duplex and single family, but not for multifamily.
So for multifamily and the transitional commercial, it's 20 units per building.
Right.
And that just makes it more efficient for development, and that's what we're after in residential development. So if this is the footprint for your 20 units of the building, then you got to think about how much open space you have to have, 20% minimum. Then you have to
Yeah,
do the
no, I got it,
parking,
I got
yeah.
it.
So it's the footprint is exactly what you need. The overall development footprint is exactly what you need.
So under,
It's just what you need, not any more than you need.
under multifamily, there's a maximum average unit size per building.
So,
Maximum is 800 square feet.
yeah, so
Yeah.
this actually, the average unit size, I think, is the innovation of this table because
Explain it to me.
We
we don't want to. That's what's gonna give flexibility to the developer to say, I can figure out my program. I can have some larger units, some small units,
Yes.
but overall, the average has to be
No more than.
for that one, for whatever, 600, 800 square feet, depending. So overall, it's going to average out that they're gonna be smaller scale,
Right,
hopefully affordable, attainable.
Right.
Housing, but it still lets you program in. I can do a 1,200 square foot that may, depending on what it is, I can get more rent for that, or I can sell that for a little bit more and just make the numbers
Just to compensate a smaller
to
unit.
compensate small.
if you think about the Governor Prince development in Orleans, it's home ownership in the front, and then it's townhomes, and then it's affordable in the back, and so that it's not all one building, but it gives that same concept of structuring it so that you have a bunch that are smaller and therefore affordable, attainable, and others that are bigger market rate that you get on other.
Yeah, this would allow for a few like 3 bedrooms.
That's what we were struggling with in the spring was we felt it was important to have some maximum unit size number, so we didn't have 1,200, 1,500 square
Right.
foot luxury.
Mm.
But then what's the right number?
Right,
And as soon as you pick that number, then whatever, it's the wrong number. So this was the way, the workaround was the average. It still lets developers tinker around with what,
I agree 100%.
And this,
I think we got a lot of good
we
feedback.
got, we
from the
actually got
developers.
very good feedback from the developers that this was, especially the affordable housing developers, this was, we asked specifically, the folks who were doing the P-Town project, they said, yeah, these are right on target
Mhm,
with what we need to make things work.
mhm.
Ted Malone looked at this chart, they were very positive about it too.
Yeah, like I said, Ted, I think if you could put a little bit of an explainer at the bottom, that just
Yeah.
so that when someone's reading, like, why is it, what's the 40,000? Why isn't it? That would be helpful for me.
Right.
6 months into this, I'll have to remember why.
It's simple, as we said, 5 years from now, when the planning board and the zoning board are trying to apply these, it's helping to incorporate that logic statement.
Yes,
And that may be true as a separate thing, not part of the bylaw, but at some point in our report, maybe capturing in English words as opposed to numbers.
Oh,
The logic
that's why
is- yeah,
the logic of this has to be
Okay.
a narration. I don't know, do people need to go over the parking dimensions and the parking requirements? That's the next group. I don't know if people, we haven't done much, we didn't do
We
anything on
didn't,
that in the
we
summer.
didn't change the table. We did add,
I'm sorry, I'm losing where you are.
I'm just scrolling down. The next two tables deal with parking requirements. Stacked parking, although I will say,
Look, I don't know what.
I don't know, page, I'm sorry.
which finger?
Well, I was gonna say, just, we have 5.11 is parking dimensions,
Page 47.
5.12 is parking requirements. And then 5.14, Martin, might get to your question about what about those great takeout businesses?
Page
Oh.
51.
We have this thing called teaser parking. Is that on page 51?
Yeah.
And so that was specifically put in there, for example, for the 10-minute parking, your point of, someone wants to do takeout and pickup. That was the compromise there, because previous versions, we had all the buildings and all the parking in the behind, but that was sort of well, what if people are just driving in to pick up?
Right.
ideally, we don't want parking in front of the building, but we're making this an exception by special permit.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be perpendicular. I mean, they could design it so it actually looks like it's, street side parking
Mhm.
parallel, make it more
Yeah,
a town center kind of design.
So I'm sorry, are we talking about the table on 47?
No, page 51, 51 is teaser parking.
I'm just pointing that out. I mean, do people in general have questions about the parking requirements? Because you do not, I didn't, because we didn't really do much on this. Different.
No,
No.
we did add, the commission recommended that we have 20% parking spaces for electric.
EVs,
Yeah,
And
High to me.
we thought it was too high and
We had 10 and they said that we should go to 20.
20, and
So
we,
20% of EV.
yeah, and we
Sounds
put,
too high.
When I read it, I was, why do they have to be in front?
Right, why did they?
Why
get
do they have to
permission?
be?
Well, the handicap on front, we don't have to, we don't have
It said-
to,
it said
No,
EV
EV.
had-
I know, but.
That's what I-
They don't
that
have
also
to be.
was a-
When I read it late last night, I'm like, I gotta walk past 10 handicap spots, now I gotta walk past another 20 EV spots.
Yeah.
And there's nobody else here, it's
Yeah.
freezing rain,
Right,
and I'm 17 paces
I
away from
wouldn't
the
do
front
that.
door. The EV parking, I don't know why we give it
Okay.
any priority other than.
I don't think it has
let
to
them
be,
put it where it's convenient.
I don't think we have to
Unless it's
stipulate in
an
front.
EV car that's handicapped.
Yeah.
That was the next conversation, my wife said I'm going to bed now. When I said that.
No,
I said, I haven't seen EV spaces, handicap EV spaces, I'm going to bed.
They, but we were having a discussion. We thought our reaction to the commission was 20 was that
Yeah.
20 was too much. So we were kind of proposing maybe we meet them halfway and say 15.
Yeah,
It might be just
As
a
long as they're not-
negotiating compromise. I don't want to go in fighting for no more than 10 EV spots. It's like the least thing on my agenda.
I know.
10%.
10%, yeah.
Ted, on page 52, the chart,
Mhm.
the one we have right there.
And is it
No,
relevant
don't show
to
flat roof.
all parking or just
Yeah,
residential? parking?
very denominational off that roof, so it's,
Yeah,
Yeah, I think
yeah.
that should be
yeah,
extension.
so it's, yeah. so
We're
it's right
having
there.
people that rent-
I try to make all the
Big
flat
thing
roofs.
is you're right.
Yeah, I
You can't
I
find
put
a
hip roofs.
vehicle. So I'd be okay with rent for apartment buildings having a minimum of 20% EV. But for retail, when someone's going in to have dinner, I don't feel obliged that we should be increasing the cost of development so that someone can charge the car for 30 minutes while they're having dinner or an ice cream. But when it comes to residential, I think we should be pushing the standard. something
Interesting thought.
interesting.
I think the 20% for residential is a good standard and
Standard and
maybe there's some standard for retail.
Some, yeah. But it's
5%. Same thing.
Paul, are you looking something up?
Yeah, actually, I had a question about use table,
The use table?
fuel stations, and EV charge stations.
We don't have a category for EV charge stations. We need a category.
Oh, we do?
Is that
Yep.
something we want to allow?
Yeah, because like Dick Associates put one in front of the door.
As an accessory?
I've gotten
You like a smile.
some phone calls about that. So,
Have you?
You guys, really?
Mostly in support.
no,
No.
No,
it's from a neighbor.
Yeah, no, but it's a good point. It's.
Yeah. So we need a new category for EV and I think are people in agreement, we don't mandate it be in front, because
correct.
that did make sense.
And for housing.
20% for hot residential, and I'm gonna put a question mark about commercial, and just take a look at it. That's sort of the pin.
I
Okay,
think you make a good point of the commercial. though. Most commercial uses, they're not there.
Yeah, if it's a
You're
hotel.
there for an hour, half hour, whatever, it's shorter term. I hope you got that juice to go home. You shouldn't have left your house if you didn't.
Right.
Well, it's also, we're increasing the cost of development. We're limiting the number of people that are gonna respond to our fees, and so.
okay.
Well, it's, yeah.
Other things in general on parking? We are down to 11 minutes and
The only question I have, and this is one, it's a generic question, Paul,
Mhm.
as an example on page 53. The parking landscaping standards, is that something, a section that would get moved instead of being in the bylaw to the designs, to the standards?
no, it's already been, what is design guidelines has already been moved.
Okay, because it seems like some places we have real detailed like this is, and other places we don't. And so I just, from a consistency perspective,
Like the screening and landscaping
yeah,
standards.
this is
Well,
pre-coverage.
it- I think maybe let's,
So,
when you see the design guidelines next month, take a look at the
okay,
parking detail in there, because some of what remained in the zoning was sort of the introduction and the performance standard generally.
Right.
And then the devil's in the details in
Right.
the
exactly.
design guidelines.
I saw these, going over this, my mind flashed back to. Back in, like, early spring, we were talking about that. And I remember I had certain questions that got answered then, I think, I don't know the specifics of it now. But my brain said, move on, you've done this.
Okay.
It's just,
Sure.
there is a lot, it's important, but there was enough detail, as I recall from the spring, that I really had no issue.
Okay. I didn't have a content issue, it was more just the, where does it go?
The other part of that is, yes, there might be logic to putting it elsewhere, but as far as formatting and well, we also have to be cognizant of what the commission's gonna look at
Yeah.
this. So if we're taking
Okay,
things that they think are key kind of protections
fine with that.
and putting them into a document that could be edited, you know. So
Understand.
I think they're gonna be protective and looking for certain things to be like hard coded into the bylaw, even though it may make sense that it lives in the other document.
Right,
We may need to keep them the
Yeah.
bylaw for that reason, just to get.
okay, page 54. Again, the diagram. It's a parking lot, 5.16. There's no way that we're gonna have something that big. So I just think the illustration is out of proportion for anything we're gonna be doing. That's like 100 parking spaces.
I know, but it's showing the different requirements in it, so if I make it smaller, it's gonna be hard to, unless I break it up into different.
Yep.
Diagrams.
I don't know, it just looks out of proportion.
So I see you're showing perimeter screening, you're showing median island.
Right.
Yeah.
Interior island, but you've got like 2 rows of interior islands, and you should have an example of each one. And maybe just the picture can be sort of blown up, easier to see, but just have one example of each of them.
Just think about it, that's all.
5.16. I want to do a time check because we now are up about 3 minutes. Do people have hard stops at 7?
No.
No.
Okay,
I mean,
I'm not gonna keep us here all night, but I would like to get a first pass of the zoning bylaw if we could, because then we could,
there's still pizza. over there.
okay. So the next set of things is you got complete street types and standard designs. You got a table there, that's 5.18.
Think, what did we decide on yesterday? If this was gonna move into the design guidelines, I think.
We're making a reference in the zoning bylaw, but the actual,
We're gonna move this out and you're gonna
Yeah.
show this next,
yeah,
okay, so we move it out and we can show it all next week,
yeah.
okay?
Next week you're doing another meeting,
No,
Next
next month, excuse me, next month. And we'll do design guidelines,
and then complete streets,
and
and that also will be a reference here, but it'll be in the design standards.
So like 5.19, would that be in the design standards?
5.19
the activation components.
activation. Yes,
Just a comment.
Yep.
Be sure that everything that's an activation component has a definition in the definitions.
yep. That's already in the design regulations, but yeah. With a diagram too, or a picture of what it is, you know.
And then 7.1, that's where Paul, the note said you were gonna review that.
Which one?
The regulatory review.
for new developments. Or special permit. Something said.
So I haven't made any changes to this. So this is the table that
This is
designates what
existing.
you would. Yeah. Other than we adjusted the building sizes to correspond,
Okay,
but this is the table that designates what level of review you would need based on what the nature of the project, the scale of the project.
okay. No comments on any of this because I don't know any of it.
I think one, I don't know if you- on page 58 under general requirements for all developments, we have been talking about having language that would stipulate a threshold for mandatory peer review. So that it's
Oh,
just
yes.
basically set, it's already set up, so we haven't figured out what the threshold is, but if you're coming in with certain type of projects,
So what do you refer to as a peer review? Just come in before you have a,
No,
no, you would have a paid outside consultant basically look at your traffic plan or your whatever the component is of the project that needs closer look to get basically a second opinion.
I mean, this, Martin, this is, this shows up in a lot of towns. I went through one project where honest, everything that went for a special permit, you had a peer review. Basically, the town selects an engineering architectural firm. They have one of record. And they've already, and they negotiate a fixed price for, you will take a proposal and do a review. And I'm trying to, I can go back and look. So we're $1,000 sticks in my head when I did an application fee. We had 10,000 square foot building. We had, you know, part of the fee was $1,000. And basically, when I had all my plans and proposals going in, it goes to the town planners, but in the case of Dedham, there's one guy sitting behind the desk with the secretary, and which is not much more than Paul has. And when you get complicated projects
Right.
there, it's basically another expert firm saying, yeah, you know, we've looked at their traffic study, you know, we've reviewed it against your zoning code. You basically have a group of people doing the technical analysis. And the concern I have, I'll just voice this for Paul in the planning department is, you know, very small department.
oh, yeah, we could have 6 of these coming in.
We could have 6 of these things coming in and, you know, and people come in with, you know, well-versed lawyers
I'm
and a
not
lot of
pushing back
people.
on it. I
So
just wasn't sure
what it
definition
is.
of
So
peer
that's what peer review, we want to say, well, we don't want to have every little project come in and have to send that out to, you know, a second engineering firm. So is there some square footage if you're doing, is it a square footage or is it a scope of work, some standard when it triggers mandatory peer review? And that's the number we haven't come to.
So in the planning and zoning board regulations, we have language in there that gives the authority, the ability for the board to just say, you know, we want, without any, there is no threshold, they could just say, whatever it is. So we have that. It's just a matter of, do we want to be more specific or further define it? To me, it's, yeah, I don't know
That
what,
could be hard to do.
yeah, I don't know what
I
the
mean-
threshold would be, but I guess the benefit of having that kind of hard code is that there's no debate and there's no haggling about, do you really need it? You're gonna really make me pay, you know, it's just like, you're over this threshold, it's black and white, just be prepared to do it. But then what's the number? What's the trigger? What's the,
Yeah. So first of all, instead of getting to the number, just check, what would the potential trigger be? So it covers, because sometimes it could be housing, somebody wants to build 40 units of housing, or they want to build
Well-
100 seat restaurant.
I think in general, in the past, I think anytime it's something on Route 6 where you're changing the traffic pattern or you're gonna be,
So that was
Having
where
a-
I was going, so to retire to the required parking requirements. Saying that any project that's gonna require X number of parking spots, whether it's housing or a restaurant or a gym. If you need, because you already have requirements on what your parking has to be. And so if your parking has to be more than 2,000 spots or whatever number it is, so captured everything else. Which is traffic and
you know, so there's kind of 2 parts to that. So there's, the first part would be, do you need to come in with a traffic analysis?
Mhm.
And then that needs to be peer reviewed, because obviously your traffic analysis is gonna say it's great, no problem, no matter who you hire. So that's when we, you know, you need the peer review to double check that. So there's always been a question about like, is this, should we, you know, from the boards, should we be requiring that they submit a traffic
Right.
analysis? Just, that's always the first part. Is this a big deal or not?
Yes.
And then, yeah, and
But
usually
you say
that
they
is-
all, their reports always say it's a go, so. Then it's too late.
So I was
But
thinking,
what trigger are you going to do a traffic report? You know, if somebody just says, you know, Max Seafood, and I'm gonna redevelop Max Seafood, and I've got 7 spots now, and I'm gonna have 8 spots next. Probably worth having a review and expense
Yeah.
for that, but if someone's building a bigger development, whether it's 80 housing units or.
well, I mean, as opposed to deciding this now, because we've got to look for the language. This is not an uncommon thing, and it's specified in a lot of towns. We have you might be asked for it, and it's just difficult. Our planning board is kind of adverse to putting any additional costs on developers, so it's just not a good dynamic if it's something we really need. So I'm wondering if we just look at the language and we try to see some other towns to see.
Why don't you, I mean, I know many towns that have that, the peer review. I don't know a lot that have thresholds, but maybe if you go on mass planners and just post, anybody have any examples of,
I mean,
and you didn't get any feedback, no?
I can post it again, maybe
I'd
get
post
lost.
it again, yeah.
Is peer review only on traffic or are there other?
No, it
No, it could be anything.
Could be
Landscape
for your-
architecture.
Yeah, like when we do 40Bs, when we did the 40Bs, we had a peer review on traffic, on the architectural design,
Mhm.
on the wastewater.
Okay.
But it was
Does the
discretion-
commission use peer review?
It was,
I mean, it was discretionary, and you chose.
Does the
the board
commission
said
use
like
peer
that.
review?
Yeah.
Peer review?
I don't know.
I know this, well, we have to have a discussion on the waivers and stuff, but
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe this is something, there's a link there where like maybe we link the requirement for a study and a peer review is, if you're doing anything that's gonna be major site plan or special permit, but then if it's on the lower order of a low intensity, maybe it's a
Okay.
request for a waiver from having to do that or something. I don't know. Otherwise, we're just gonna be picking what's a magic number for an amount of traffic generated.
I see a lot that are municipal impacts, impacts
Yeah.
on the water sewer,
Mhm.
school system,
Mhm.
taxes. I mean, there's a lot of
Yeah.
that too.
I think, well, the other part too is just formula business, like. And that actually would capture that, because any formula business is an automatic special permit, and I think that would be, our review criteria. As it is now, we may add to it, but, takes into account what's the economic impact and, all that stuff, and I think that's something that should be peer reviewed and
Yeah.
have
Mhm.
an expert.
But you
Company
were,
looking at
Yeah.
that, not just them saying, oh yeah, it's gonna create job and it's gonna be whatever, it's just.
but you also want your criteria to be elaborated enough, so, because the peer review firm coming in should be taking the zoning document and saying, okay, this is your regulatory framework, how does this proposal meet or deviate from that regulatory framework, or could make arguments about, the traffic study was not up to par, they could make a qualitative judgment, but they also, primarily, they try to highlight the conformance with the intent of the zoning bylaw.
But a big part of that, yeah, I totally agree. All of it would need to be looked at, but specifically. The bylaw language we have now talks about. No, it's not, it's in the, anyways. You would need some outside expertise to look at what's the financial economic impact. Is it really what they're saying? It's.
Me when ask the commission if they know of any examples.
Yeah, yeah. Right. Is there anything else we need to really go over? Because I have right now. Looking at definitions and differentiation between sports complex and athletic facilities. The whole building activation and the 100-foot setback. Around building activation, we want to look at that number. And,
You got EV parking for
the
residential.
EV parking,
Yeah.
peer review, and then the density. This is just a cleanup about, between multifamily. The specifying the building.
Yep.
But that's a cleanup, but we have to really do some thinking about sports complexes. The definitions of workforce housing and seasonal housing, building activation, EVs, and peer review. Are sort of things we have to track down. I would also say, we don't have to go into these in depth. Design review regulations, we will do that next meeting. 40R bylaw. 40R is an overlay bylaw that gets put in place, and once it's in place, it allows the town to be eligible for financial payments for, is it housing or more than just housing?
Well, it's an incentive payment for adopting it.
Okay,
And then there's bonuses for each unit you
each unit you build.
produce, right?
We have to figure out, we are amending an overlay district. And the intersection of a new overlay district is one that Paul is gonna have a conversation with the commission about. And it could are they in conflict? Have we seen examples of where they sit side by side on top of one another?
Yeah, I think the 40R, does that have its own set of parameters about density and
It
units
does,
and
for density, yeah.
so my thinking is that if those don't align with what our charts and tables are,
Ours are actually higher than those, a little bit,
meaning
a
Better.
little more dense, better, yeah.
better.
We really don't need them. If this gets adopted, I mean, frankly, you're not gonna get a lot of money from the state for production, or even, having it in place. And you'll get a little bit here for each individual project, 3,000 per unit. But it really doesn't amount to much, so I'm not sure you need to.
Well, I guess-
Mark with like this, but
Because I would
I've
only
already
want
written it up as a draft one, but
Yeah.
I kind of like it just kind of like. It's unnecessary because the base zoning that it gets adopted is,
right, but if what we're doing here checks all the boxes for conformity, and maybe we're even better, so all the numbers check out, all the charts, everything we've done, and it's more just like, okay, click this, append it to the application and get the 40R designation. I'd be amenable to that just because, it's a good feather in the cap of we doing stuff, demonstrating, and if any money we get is worth it, and it's just the best practice, but unless it's that simple, I wouldn't recommend pursuing it where we have to go back and tweak numbers and undo what we did, because we got this down.
right.
But what you're saying is our numbers look good and probably even higher, better standards, which again, there's nothing that would disqualify us from basically qualifying.
We want to talk to the state about it, because if you actually adopt, this bylaw and we want to put a 40R over it, they may say, well, you don't need one, you've already got.
Well, that's what
And we don't,
we shouldn't have two overlays, one
No,
over
well,
another, if we
well,
don't
we have
have
the
to.
base zone, which has
Yeah.
got everything we need. We overlay it with something that actually has less density than what's on the base.
Well, that's what I'm saying though.
They may
If
say
they weren't,
you're not qualified.
yeah, we wouldn't want to go backwards, but I'm saying if we could adopt the 40R with our numbers. And then basically double dip, it's that we're using the 40R, we're qualifying for the 40R with our numbers, and then we're more of a formality adopt it. If we get something in, we're also gonna get that money. May not be a lot, but
Yeah.
I
They're
mean,
clamping down a lot.
we should-
on
we- well,
40, yeah.
In the press
Okay,
release on the new
right.
housing bond bill, though, they talked about they substantially increased the money for 40R. I mean, I just saw a line.
Well, there's, what's happened is like they created a lot over the last 20 years, a lot of 40R districts, and they were very, generous with the incentive payment up front. Like Kingston got $600,000 just for implementing an overlay district that theoretically had a lot of potential for development. But it doesn't, because it's like in the middle of a wind turbine area. And so they've not built one unit. And so a lot of that was happening around the state, and they'd have these smart growth overlay districts in place, but nothing ever got built. And all of a sudden, this wave of development came over the last 5 years, and it's really sort of kind of bankrupting them. So they're starting to push back a little bit on what's eligible and what's not.
Well, yeah, well, I guess we have a lot of stuff going on, so my gut reaction would be, let's not adopt another overlay, but even like, if next year we say we don't have to change a thing, it's
Yeah.
just, we apply for the 40R, we're gonna
Right.
qualify, the state says, yeah, we're good, and we just get, it just puts us in line for some money, maybe, that would be
Right.
like but I don't wanna undo, that's only, like I said, if all of our things are meet or
Mhm.
exceed, and state says, yeah, you're good to go, you're locked in, it's just, just apply, and it's a rubber stamp, and you get that gold seal.
So Bill Rail is the administrator, and I know him pretty well. I've worked with him in a couple of the 40Rs. We should have a conversation with him.
If you can get a phone call.
Yeah.
That we can talk, that would be great.
Yeah.
That'd be great. So we could put that,
Would having a 40R require town meeting approval?
Yeah.
yes, it's a bylaw.
It's a,
We'd be adding another bylaw onto this,
okay, all right, well.
So,
I think you have a
which could be either.
Yeah.
We do it, we never want it, or we want it, do we really feel we need it now, or could we do it next year? I guess those are the decision points. The ADU is out there, we're just trying to figure out with the new housing bond bill. Do we
Right.
need to go back to town, because we have an not affordability, we have a year-round
Requirement.
requirement, and we just don't know how our ADU bumps up to the new law.
And I don't know have they actually released beyond the bond bill itself, released regulations or procedures related to that, so we know the answer to the question.
No,
No,
Yeah, so it hangs there until we find out.
well, I mean, I don't want to, if we don't have an effective ADU bylaw, if our bylaw is ineligible, I don't want to be waiting 18 months before we can change it. So we just want to try to track that one down. Formula businesses we've talked about, we've looked at 2 or 3, we got to put our heads down and come back with something that we can kick around. And then, as I said, the integration of existing bylaws, this is going through Carolyn's detailed thing, and Paul really should say, here are the 5 or 6 changes we can make to language that will integrate our bylaw, if it's that simple, hopefully. But those are some of the outstanding issues, which we have to all get done fairly quickly.
Mhm.
So
We made a lot of progress today.
Yeah.
I think we
I
did.
mean, you guys did a lot over the summer.
Um,
Do you want to approve the minutes?
yes. Carolyn had sent out 2 minutes for approval,
May 14th and
May
May 21st.
21st. Have folks had a chance to take a peek at them?
I did, yes.
Can I get a motion to accept the minutes?
I wasn't there for the meeting, so.
No, you can
Yes,
still vote.
yeah.
You can still
Yeah,
vote.
okay. They look good to me. I propose we accept. Or second.
Martin is second
I'll
then?
second that.
Okay, great. We have a couple cleanup minutes from meetings in April that we didn't quite ratify, so we'll put our heads together and get them cleaned up, so the clerk doesn't ding us until,
Right.
yeah. Okay, so a meeting is it October 15th? Is that the date? It's 4 weeks from now,
yeah.
October 15th. Again, another 3-hour meeting. We will, you will get design guidelines ahead of time, and to the best of mine, but mostly Paul's ability, we'll try to track down as many of these open items as we can, so we can start kind of putting final touches on this stuff. Any other business or any other comments people want to make before we close?
pizza good? What do you want to
Pizza's
eat?
great.
What do you want to eat next time?
You and I spoke on the phone a few weeks ago. Is it appropriate to talk about that now or save that for?
Why don't we do that the next one, just because we're running so much.
Well, I know, yeah. it's like-
And I know, yeah. We'll talk. So, if I hear nothing else, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All right, all in favor? Thank you.